I believe we're on the air. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this May 14th, 2025 regular meeting of the Planning and
Recording in
Transportation Commission.
progress.
Shall I repeat? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this May 14th, 2025 regular meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission. Ms. Dow, would you call the roll?
Yes, Chair Aiken.
Here.
Vice Chair Chang.
Here.
Commissioner Heckman.
Go Warriors.
Commissioner James.
Here.
Commissioner G.
Here.
Commissioner Peterson. Commissioner Templeton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Assistant Director Armour, we had discussion in a previous meeting whether we should cover agenda changes and deletions before entertaining public comment. Do you have a preference?
No, go ahead and follow the order listed on the agenda. That's fine.
Very good. All right. Then let's begin with public comment tonight for items not on the agenda. Ms. Dow, do we have any speaker cards or raised hands?
Yes, one in person from Jim Robinson.
Thank you. Yeah, that's me. I'm Jim Robinson. It's about regarding the bulb out on East Crescent, Southwood Drive, near Center in Edgewood. I've lived there since I was a little kid, since 1966, and I'm back. I'm taking care of my mom. That street, if you guys decide against the bulb out, that's fine. I just want it to be safe, and I want you to consider the safety. I feel very safe now, and without that traffic bulb out, I'd just like you guys to consider something as good or better, because it's a scary intersection without the traffic controls, and the way it is now, you cannot possibly go past 20 miles an hour around that turn, which is really good. I have to back out, and sometimes I back into my driveway backwards, and I'm right across the street from the thing. And that's really all I wanted to say. Thanks for considering a safety. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Do we have anyone else?
No, just the one.
All right, let's proceed to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Begin with Ms. Armour.
No changes to the agenda, though there were a few items, revisions that were sent to you via email and provided in printed form at desks.
All right, let's move on to city official reports. Ms. Armour, would you begin?
Yes, thank you. Jennifer Armour, Assistant Director. Next slide. So for our next meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission will be on May 28th. We are planning to bring to you the parking program update, as well as returning to you with revised maps for the El Camino Real retail nodes. And at this time, we actually don't have much scheduled for your meetings in June. I will have more information at that May 28th meeting as to whether either or both of those meetings will be canceled. Next slide. I've got a lot to touch on in regards to council items. On May 5th, the council took public comment and a staff presentation for the project at 4075 El Camino Way, but because of the late hour, they continued it. That will be returning to council for consideration on May 27th. On May 12th, the city council approved the accessory dwelling unit ordinance update. And then starting next week, upcoming meetings on May 19th, we've got two pre-screenings for for planned community zoning, potential planned community zoning applications at the locations of 788 San Antonio Road and 800 San Antonio Road. These are both projects that were actually recently approved for development, and the applicants are now considering additional dwelling units, and so are coming in for a pre-screening with council on those. And that would be something, if they do submit a formal application, that would eventually come to PTC for review. And then on May 27th, in addition to the continuation of the project at 4075 El Camino Way, they will also be discussing the El Camino Real focus area that was recommended by PTC on March 26th. The PTC liaison for that is Kari Templeton. And as with previously, I think it would be helpful to have you attend if you are available. If not, we can discuss alternatives. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Starlack, are you filling in for Mr. Rios tonight?
I am. I have two items. One is that the Safe Streets for All Safety Action Plan was reviewed by Policy and Services last night, the final draft of it. That final draft is posted online on the project website, and we are tentatively scheduling it for adoption at council on June 2nd. The other item is that you may have noticed the El Camino Real bicycle lanes have been striped. Caltrans is working to clarify the no parking restrictions for the bike lanes. They hope to finish those no parking restriction signage installations next week. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Ms. Armour or Ms. Starlack? No? Very well then. Let's proceed to the first action item. Action item number 2, the public hearing, quasi-judicial, for recommendation of an applicant's request for approval of a vesting tentative map to merge 5 parcels together. Do we have a presentation?
Good evening.
Oh, yes. Do we have any disclosures before we begin? All right. Mr. Sauls, please go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Garrett Sauls. I'm a principal planner working on this application for a vesting tentative map at 3150 El Camino Real. Just to go over briefly what a vesting tentative map sort of serves or does is it's a subdivision application that can be useful to merge, divide, or create condominium parcels on a property. And what's really important is that a vesting tentative map can vest the development rights for a project once that project has been deemed complete. It doesn't have to be determined to be approved, but it can, that will allow for a period of time once the project has been deemed complete that project's entitlement rights and the development standards, even if they changed afterwards, after that time it's been deemed complete, the standards that are in effect at that time, that project gets to hold on to those for a period of time afterwards. This specific project is looking to merge 5 lots together to create 111,000 square foot parcel in order to facilitate a 368 unit development on the property, which you can see a rough image of that on the screen here on the left side. In terms of the analysis that we do with this vesting tentative map, we are trying to compare whether or not the proposed lot merger in this case conforms or doesn't conform with the city's zoning code. And what is convenient in this specific district is that the commercial service commercial district doesn't have a minimum lot size or a maximum lot size or minimum or maximum dimensions for each of these parcels. And so however large or small they were, whenever they were merged together or divided, that effectively can occur in many different ways. And in this case, they'll be merging them together. There are no private streets that are proposed where you might see those for the 4075 El Camino Way project that was discussed earlier, where you may be making townhomes, they'll typically have a private street within them. And in those scenarios, a private street would actually end up reducing the lot size for the parcel, but they just have access to the property, or are proposing to have access to the property on the southbound, directionally southbound off of El Camino Real. When the city or staff are trying to make a decision on a vesting tentative map, the findings that need to be made are actually needed to be made in the negative in comparison to other findings. And so it's more a matter of asking the question of, can we not make this finding to determine that it would be able to be approved, which is, in comparison to a lot of other projects, usually feels kind of odd at times. But what is appropriate in this case is that we are able to make those negative findings for us to make that recommendation. And so you see those on the screen here, which are also included in the attached findings for the record of land use action for this project attached to the staff report. There was an issue that we had noted during the pre-meeting, which were just to add some additional notes on the parcel map, which we'll be working with the applicant to do, just to call out the additional parcels that are to be merged together. There are, I think, currently 3 or 4 parcels indicated on the parcel map, and there's actually these small parcels that you see in the center are actually 2 individual parcels. So we'll just have a work with the applicant to make that correction before we put that before the city council on the consent item as a consent item. But other than that, there were no other corrections that we needed to make. And staff's recommendation would be to recommend to the Planning Commission to approve the proposed tentative map to City Council based on the findings and conditions of approval attached in the record of land use action, the draft record of land use action. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sauls. Do we have any clarifying questions from the commission? Vice Chair Chang.
I have a quick question about the assessor parcel line that's on the map. Does that also get removed or does that stay? This is the one separating parcels 142, 20, 35. Oh, no, sorry, 142, 20, 54 and 142, 20, 55. The 2 on the right.
Yeah, so to my understanding, that's going to stay, but it doesn't have the same effect as a underlying lot line where it might otherwise cause an issue maybe down the line where someone could argue that that's actually a legal parcel line once these are merged together.
Thank you. So that's something that's only used for the purposes of assessing and not for anything else.
That is my understanding of it. I don't know if the city attorney who's here with us has anything further, but usually when it, if it is as it is with this case, described as an assessor's parcel line and isn't recorded as a subdivision line went through the process, then that's not something that would need to be removed.
That's right. I guess I would just add, the assessor's parcels are for tax assessment purposes, and they don't have to line up with legal lots. And it's most likely that this property owner, after the lots are merged, will go and work with the assessor's office to also change the boundaries of the tax parcels. But that's not part of a subdivision process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Heckman.
I was just going to add, based on experience, once this map is recorded, it does get run through the assessor's office, and the assessor's office will often on its own basically replace these APN numbers that are there with one new APN. There can be dialogue with the property owner if the property owner has tax reasons to keep multiple APNs, but frequently in this situation, and it takes a while. 6 months after the map is recorded, you get a notice saying, hey, you have a new APN replacing the old ones, and here it is.
Any other clarifying questions? No? Do we have any public commenters for this item, Ms. Dow?
Yes, there is one online from Terry Holzheimer.
Can you hear me?
Just before we do start with that,
we
we
have an
should invite the
applicant.
applicant to speak if they wish.
Hi, my name is Gary Johnson. I'm with the Acclaim Companies. We worked closely with planning staff to move ahead with this vesting tentative map. And our design team is here today to answer any questions we have. Easton McAllister from Talus Engineers and Chris Lee from Studio T Square. Here, we also want to just specifically thank the skilled planning staff of the city of Palo Alto, Garrett Sauls, Carl Schneider from Fire, Jonathan Late, planning director, to work closely with our team to make this project a reality. And so we're just here to field any questions related to the vesting tentative map.
Thank you. All right, shall we move on to public comment then?
Okay, yes, so I have one on Zoom and one in person. So we can start with Terry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I am a resident that lives within a half mile of this proposed project site at 3150 El Camino Real. Although I do agree that this is a good location for housing, I think it lacks several things, and I'll try to go as fast as I can on them. Number one, the traffic study, which I looked at, and I hope you guys have a chance to look at it if you haven't. Although it's a very useful paper, the study is I think is deficient in several limited ways. It is bounded by Page Mill Road to the north and on Hanson Way to the south. I believe this is insufficient due to the significant amount of traffic that also comes from the University Avenue area and from Stanford. And it does not include the traffic that comes from the south along Arascadero to north to Palo Alto on a regular basis. Now that El Camino is now turning into a bike boulevard, I also believe there should be a more extensive study traffic done for this bike lane. Number two, I think there is a lack of meaningful park and outdoor living space for this development. Remember, the nearest park spaces are dangerously across major roadways and intersections. Are you expecting children to cross them? For many years, Palo Alto has had a major deficiency in park space. According to the National Recreation and Park Association, park space in Palo Alto is also deficient in many ways. It needs to have a standard of 4 acres per 1,000 residents. That is not happening now, and it needs to. We need more park space, not less, and this development should have added that. Finally, I'd like to mention underparked. I think that this proposal under this proposed garage has only one entrance and exit. That should be a major concern and a red flag for all of you. This forces residents to drive in and out of one entrance, as well as a dangerous part for people to cross when they're walking or going back and forth to their work environments. I think that this needs more study. It needs a better traffic study. It needs a more meaningful attempt to add park space. All of these things need to be done. And I would encourage you to reject the proposal without major modifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Holzheimer. Next.
And the next, our in-person speaker is from Jaime Vasquez.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chair. My name is Jaime Vasquez, and I'm a field representative for the NorCal Carpenters Union. Local 405, which covers the city of Palo Alto. And I understand the purpose of this project is to merge 5 parcels into 111,000 square foot site to develop 360 units of building. The major undertaking, the one that has the potential to create a lot of work for our local skilled carpenters, including many of our union members. It's not here, I'm not here to speak against the project, but to highlight the opportunity it represents if the right choices are made. What the project of this size partners with the responsible contractor, one that hires locally and uses a state certified apprenticeship program. And it doesn't just blind build housing, it creates high road careers with healthcare and family supporting wages. It keeps tax dollars and economic benefits circulating in our community. We've seen firsthand how projects like this can uplift not just buildings, but entire neighborhoods when done right. I urge the commission to consider labor standards and local hire to be part of this project's framework moving forward. Let's make sure 3150 El Camino Real lives up to its full potential, not just in what it builds, but who it builds it for. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments?
Yes, one more on Zoom from Renee Baez.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, good evening, council members. I want to first thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Renee Baez, and I am a field representative for the Carpenters Union. I'm speaking today as a concerned worker just to urge you to ensure that any public or publicly supported development project in our community include strong labor standards. These projects should benefit everyone, not just in terms of infrastructure, but also by creating good paying and safe and dignified jobs for local workers. Fair wages, protections for workers, and the use of skilled local labor can make a lasting difference in the lives of families while strengthening our local economy. As you consider upcoming developments such as this one on El Camino, please stand with the workers and prioritize labor standards that reflect our community's values. I've attempted to reach out multiple times to Gary with the claimed companies, but have not been given the proper time of day. We'd love to, we're not against building housing, commercial projects. We want to build, we love to build, we want this community to grow, but just to be fair for everyone, including the local workers in the area. Just want you to consider that. I want to thank you, council members, for your service and for standing up for fairness and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baez. Do we have any other speakers?
No, that's our speakers.
Okay, applicant is entitled to a rebuttal if you wish. Very good. Commissioner Heckman, I have a light here from you. Is that a holdover?
No, when you get to discussion, I'm ready.
Okay, very good. All right, I think it's time for that. So I would like to open this item to discussion from the commission.
And through the chair, if there are any questions for the applicant, I would encourage we do that before closing the public comment.
Very good. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So as the staff report makes clear and even the applicant noted, our purview tonight is really quite constrained. We're talking about the design of a map on paper. We're not talking about the design of what will be built on that. That is the subject of a separate process that our planning director is handling. So the question I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask the applicant to indulge me because I think it's very useful for us commissioners to understand as applications come through us how the applicants arrive at the densities that they want to propose. So in this situation, the density is just slightly below what the housing opportunity site inventory was anticipating. And I'm wondering if the the applicant could just say a few words about, what considerations went into the decision that you'd be, even though you could have more units if you wanted, you ended up with a design that had slightly fewer?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Happy to talk about that. So one of the considerations that we at Acclaim Companies really look at hard is parking. And so making sure that our properties and the multifamily projects that we develop are properly parked and have the proper amenities for all the tenants that are going to be living here in Palo Alto along the El Camino corridor is one of the highest priorities that we have here. So a lot of thought and consideration went into that, and that informed partly our decision to slightly reduce the number of units for the project. So we feel that that this, although it is a transit-oriented development, that it's far enough away that we wanted to make sure that we were handling that in a good way.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Chang.
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate some of the same things that Commissioner Heckman had said, which is we are purely looking at the vesting tentative map tonight. And I, for one, am really glad to see some lot consolidation so that we can make the most out of the land that we have in Palo Alto. That's it.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to ask the applicant if you've worked with the Carpenters Union in the past and other projects. They're probably one of the major workforce suppliers in Northern California, particularly in this region. They have a training center in Morgan Hill.
Yes, I apologize. I spoke, there's two representatives of the Carpenters Union here today. I have spoken with Jaime, who was here in person, and we are going to set up a time to connect. As I mentioned to Jaime today, we have not even selected our general contractor for the project at all. So we're happy to speak to the Carpenters Union when it's appropriate.
I understand. And then another question is, wage theft has been been an ongoing issue in the region because the cost of living is so high here that everyone's heard of, I think they call it Silvery Towers. They've had some nicknames for it, where the workforce was locked in a container, was unpaid. They weren't free to leave. They were threatened with their harm to their family if they complained. So because of that, there's a heightened issue on large projects that the contractor that comes in is using high road practices. So I just wanted to ask if you've had problems with general contractors in the past. I mean, obviously, everybody knows the experience of managing contractors can be like managing invisible cats some ways. So it's difficult to be responsible for everything. But then in this region, because the special circumstances, it is important to be responsible all the way down to the workforce, that you don't have somebody locked in a container, in Oakland every night.
Yeah, so at Acclaim, Mark Johnson, the partner, and I grew up in the area. We're from here. We're not an out-of-town developer that's going to be absent. Our office is right over here off of Willow Road in Middlefield and Menlo Park. And so it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over to the site. We're also general contractors ourselves and hold an active license. And so we plan on managing this project and being boots on the ground every day.
And as a general contractor, are you signatory with the Carpenters or any other building trades?
No, because we're too small. We're just really too small to. We don't really exercise our contractor's license for projects like this. This is way beyond the scope of what we can do as contractors. We act more in the realm of a developer on projects of this size.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. We're asking questions of you. You don't have to sit back down because they're all for you. So anyway, thank you for coming out here and answering our questions. I was wondering, so I've lived on both sides of El Camino in this part of town, and there's some really good bike paths that are back there. And I'm just looking to see if that would connect to your neighborhood down Hanson Way. And it's a little awkward and probably outside the scope of tonight's conversation. So I just wanted to ask if you have thought about the bike paths, like what high school would kids be going to from your development? And are we going to be able, would you be willing to prioritize working on making sure that there's safe bike paths through the neighborhood in addition to El Camino when you're working with the planning and transportation departments for your project?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we would certainly be willing to look at that. However, we are, as you can, if you look at the site, we're constrained a bit, sandwiched between the Parmani Hotel and Palo Alto Square. So we're mid-block. So there's only really so much we can do in terms of bike paths, but we look forward to El Camino Real being a bike corridor. And we made many accommodations for that with the project in terms of when we were designing it with our civil engineer.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I would encourage you to think for children to possibly not be only have that one choice of how to get to school down El Camino, because there is such a very adjacent, rich network of bike paths off of Hanson Way and Hanover that connect to Barron Park, which has a bike path to Gunn High School. So I hope you'll think about that, because it sounds like a really exciting project. And we want to make sure that the families that live there can connect with the whole neighborhoods that they're adjacent to. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions for the applicant? No, thank you very much. I guess that closes public comment. So we'll move on to additional comments from the commissioners, if any. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So I am supportive of the staff recommendation. I do think that all the findings can be made for this lot merger. I want to echo what Vice Chair Chang said, that it's an example of a concept that we were promoting during our El Camino Real discussion, that assemblage of properties can yield better projects that can be built at scale. And for example, in this one, they're providing they're over parking actually per our standard, I think, and so so we want to encourage that kind of behavior, and we're seeing it in this instance. Let's see. I did have a couple of notes on the record of land use approval for staff to look at possibly changing. On packet page 18, these are the findings approved in the negative on this one. So the first and second finding both reference our general and specific plans. The first sentence of our second finding is there is no adopted specific plan for the project site, which is true. I think that sentence needs to be also included in finding number 1, because that's about specific plans too, so that finding can be complete. So that's one suggestion, just copy the first sentence of 2 up into 1. And then the second suggestion I have is on packet page 24 in section 7. So the second half of this paragraph is about an extension. And the way you get an extension is you have the applicant, at that point, the approval holder needs to make an application before the map expires. And then it'll come through planning commission to council. But I think a clarification needs to be made here, that the only thing that has to happen before the map expires is the request for the extension. You don't have to apply early enough that you actually get through this whole process and get an approved extension by council before the original deadline. And I think that's what's meant here, but the language could be clear. And I think at the end of the fourth line from the bottom, recommendation of the planning commission upon the written application of the subdivider, if you add the word submitted after subdivider, that clarifies what I think is the intent of this provision. And so with those 2 changes, I'm ready to support staff recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Heckman. Any other comments? Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you. This is a question to staff. The packet says that there is a CEQA waiver on this project. Is that correct?
It's that the project is reviewed in conjunction with this CEQA document that we've provided or prepared for the ARB application. And that is a streamlined review process. That is a newer provision in state law in the last couple of years for evaluating projects.
So we have maybe less than a paragraph to review on environmental concerns. It's got the stormwater pollution plan. What's the criteria for the accelerated review?
So at a high level, it's looking at how the project complies with the city's adopted, in this case, our adopted comprehensive plan mitigation measures. And so what we're really trying to establish is whether or not this project requires new mitigation beyond what the city has already adopted for its general growth pattern to 2030. So at a high level, it sort of captures a lot of different things, but it just asks the question broadly of, is this project creating new impacts or new mitigation measures than what we've already adopted and can apply through sort of standard language to this application?
This site's near one of the creeks, isn't it?
The Matadero Creek is further down south from this, but it's not right next to it, no.
And so the question is then, is there any existing pre-existing contamination on that site? I'm not familiar if there's been a gas station there, agricultural. I'm sure there was agricultural at one point.
I'm going to jump in. We may provide some specific answer to that, but jump in and rephrase what Mr. Sauls was saying is what you're really looking at here is the vesting tentative map. And so the question is the lot merger proposed by the vesting tentative map creating any environmental issues that wouldn't have been already reviewed and mitigated through the review for the development project?
So we get the soil sampling on what the actual issues are when the project starts?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I also just want to clarify, Commissioner, I think you referenced that there's one paragraph on environmental review, and in the staff report, there is a summary paragraph explaining what the environmental review was, but we also link to the full environmental review document. So that's not, it's not just that one paragraph. There is an analysis of how this project qualifies for the exemption and why the comprehensive plan mitigation measures are adequate.
Can we get that link?
It is on packet page
26. It's the link, which is attachment C to the staff report.
The same page that has the link to the project plans.
Perfect, thank you.
Vice Chair Chang.
I just wanted to thank Commissioner Templeton for her comments about the bike path or a potential bike path, because when I was reading this and saw the 368 units, while I'm in support of this vesting tentative map, I'm very concerned about the future bicyclists on El Camino and a driveway that is now going to be probably one of the most heavily used driveways along the entire El Camino corridor during, say, morning commute hours. And so as this project moves through the process, encourage, I think, transportation to do whatever we can to make sure that there's good mirrors and signage and whatnot there, because we're not reviewing the full plans right now. But other than that, I'm happy to make a motion if there's no other comments.
I have one just to check. Staff, are you comfortable with the modifications that Commissioner Heckman has suggested?
Yes.
All right, I think we're ready for a motion then.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation with Commissioner Heckman's suggested changes.
Second. Very good. Ms. Dow, you call the roll.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Chair Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner G,
Yes.
Commissioner James,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to agenda item number 3.
Give us just a moment, and Julia Knight will be presenting this item.
Good evening. My name is Julia Knight. I'm a senior program manager in the Planning and Development Services Department. And I have a presentation for you tonight on the CIP Comprehensive Plan Consistency. Are you able to? Oh, sorry. Veronica, if you wouldn't mind helping with the slides, that'd be excellent. Thank you. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. Our purpose tonight is to review each new capital improvement project, CIP, for consistency with the comprehensive plan. This is an annual effort that we do, so you should have been familiar with it from previous years if you've been on the commission. I myself am new to it this year, so thank you for bearing with me. And we'll go through just high level a few of those key projects for this year for your review. And we do have my colleagues from various departments on online and in the room to answer questions on the specific projects themselves. I am sort of just the corraller of information. So really quickly, we have about 200 active CIPs, and of those, about 21 are new this year, 180 are carrying over from previous years. Those 180 have already been reviewed by yourselves or previous commissioners in other years for their consistency with the comprehensive plan and do not require additional review at this time. The 21 new CIPs for this fiscal year, 2026, include 10 placeholder projects, which serve administrative purposes only, and which ASD, Administrative Services Department, advises does not need review on an individual basis for consistency with the comprehensive plan. And then 11 additional projects which do require review by yourselves for consistency with the comprehensive plan. And of those 11 projects that we'll be focusing on tonight, 5 fall into the, or align, I should say, most closely with the comprehensive plan element for natural environment, 4 community services and facilities, 1 for transportation, and 1 for land use and community design. And that chart is just slightly updated from what was in your packet. Next slide, please. We can come back to these individual slides, which organize each of the CIPs by their associated element at any time if you have questions. But we have, a number of natural environment ones that are aligned with parks and open space. The CIPs in the community services section are, with the libraries and the Palo Alto Art Center upgrades to the Lucy Stern Community Center, the golf course, things like that. Our one transportation project is related to charging stations and maintenance citywide, aligning with sustainable transportation goals. And then we have one last category for land use and community design, and that is the Ramona Street update right out front City Hall here, which aligns with a lot of our retail and vibrancy goals. I also just want to mention that sort of collectively, if we go to the next slide, if you don't mind, Veronica, these placeholder projects that I mentioned, they are, just for benefits and salaries and things for the staff that are administering these CIPs. But as a whole, we have found those to be consistent with a number of goals and policies in the community services section of our comp plan, which strives to provide excellent service to our community and to have a really highly trained and motivated staff. And with that, I will just proceed on to our recommended motion for your consideration, which is to recommend to the Finance Committee and City Council that the proposed 2026-2030 capital improvement projects listed in Attachment A are consistent with the Comprehensive Plan 2030 policies, goals, and programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Do we have any clarifying questions from the commission? I see none. Do we have any public comment on this item?
I have no request to speak.
Very good. Commissioners, comments? Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So I suppose I do have one question, but it wasn't worth asking before the potential for public comment. And that is, so really we're focused tonight on 11 new programs. And I'm looking at VR 30,000, which is the scheduled vehicle and equipment replacement for fiscal year 2030. And it seems to me the nature of this is funding for the city's vehicle fleet. So I was just trying to understand why this is a new program rather than a continuing program, because I suspect that we have to fund the vehicle fleet every year. So it's just kind of trying to understand how you build this list of the distinction between what's new and what's continuing.
Absolutely. I believe some of my colleagues from ASD are online. Naomi or Paul, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure. Hi, good evening. Paul Harper, the Office of Management and Budget. So the way that we structure the capital budget every year for the vehicle fund is that we essentially add a new project for the 5th year of the capital improvement plan or the 5-year capital improvement plan. And so it is new in the sense that it's a new project that wasn't in the budget last year. So this is pretty common to have a new vehicle project show up every year as a new project. But to your point, it is a continuing fleet replacement, and we fund specific vehicles based on requirements to replace them due to mileage and usage and things like that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful, and now I understand. So I did read through the descriptions, and I appreciate the various departments putting some effort into those project descriptions. All 11 of these projects look terrific and meaningful and will improve Palo Alto. And of course, the 10 that we're not really looking at, but those are designed to ensure that we're treating our city staff right. Those are very important too. So I am in support of the staff recommendation on this item. Thanks.
Any additional questions or comments? I believe we're ready for a motion then.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Ms. Dow, would you call the roll?
Chair Aiken,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner James,
Yes.
Commissioner G,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you all. Since we're making good time here, shall we just proceed to our study session?
Yes, I think we can. I'm going to give our transportation staff a minute or two to come down and join us. And they will, maybe we take a 5-minute break just to give them a chance to join us.
Sure. 5
Thank you.
minutes. We will return at 6:55. All right, I believe we are ready to resume.
Thank you. I will introduce Charlie Cole, who will be making the presentation this evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Charlie Cole, Senior Transportation Planner with the Office of Transportation. I'm here to speak with you all about the South Palo Alto Bike Ped Connectivity Project. I'll just refer to it as the project for the remainder of the presentation. Joining me is Sylvia Starlack, Transportation Planning Manager. We also have Amanda Leahy from Kittleson and Associates on the line as well. So if you have any questions, we can bring her in to help answer those. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview. So the staff report provides an overview of the project and work completed to date. We've recommended that PTC review the existing conditions report and draft goals and design priorities memorandum. And the feedback we're looking from PTC tonight is on the initial crossing opportunity locations presented in the existing conditions report and the draft design and evaluation criteria presented in the goals and design priorities memorandum. Here's the agenda for this evening. I'll provide an overview of the project. We'll talk a bit about the overarching goals and objectives for the project. We'll review work completed to date and next steps. I'll also spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of sections that are in the existing conditions report because I believe that's important for the commission and the general public to understand. Then we'll go over the potential crossing opportunity locations and draft design priorities and evaluation criteria. So first with project objectives, the purpose of this project is to improve bicycle and pedestrian accessibility across the rail corridor in the southern portion of the city. To accomplish this, the goal of this project is to identify locally preferred crossing design locations and design concepts for 2 new grade separated crossings. Each of the 2 preferred concepts will be developed into what we call 15% designs and packaged into a final plan. The final plan will include an implementation plan and funding strategy for next steps, which includes final design, environmental, and construction. So I just want to emphasize that last bit here that for this project, the goal is to get to the 15% designs. And we consider this to be the conceptual planning phase of the overall project. Next slide, please. So this is your project study area shown on your screen. It's outlined with the blue dashed line and bounded by Oregon Expressway, Page Mill Road, Middlefield, San Antonio, and El Camino Real. The study area figure also shows current crossing locations, the gray dot that you see there within and immediately adjacent to the study area. It also shows the suggested walking and cycling routes, just for some additional context. Next slide. So just to touch briefly on the significance of this project, several citywide plans and studies, including the ones that are shown on your screen, have identified a need for additional grade separated bicycle and pedestrian crossings, particularly in the southern portion of the city. So I just want to highlight that this project is really implementing the recommendations of previous work from the city. This is all in the need to address the mobility gaps and barriers to walking and biking in support of the city's mobility and sustainability goals. Next slide. So here's our project timeline. It's a step-by-step approach. And as shown, we've reviewed existing conditions and are currently in phase 1 of community engagement, where we're working with the community to establish the design priorities for crossing alternatives. Next, the project team will develop crossing alternatives, share those with the community for feedback during phase 2. Following phase 2, there'll be some refinement of those alternatives. We'll package everything up into a public draft report that's released for review and comment in phase 3. And then the goal for phase 4 will be to obtain council adoption of a final report. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of phase 1 in community engagement, what's happening right now. The screen on your screen, this includes a list of all of the different events and meetings, kind of showing how we're engaging with the community through a variety of different mediums. I won't go through all this in great detail, but if you have any questions, want to talk through this, I'm happy to do that later. Next slide. So now we'll talk a little bit about the existing conditions report that we shared with you in the agenda packet for this evening. So on your slide, it lists all of the sections that are in the existing conditions report, just recognizing that there's no data source that perfectly represents the real world. We looked at a variety of different data sources to hopefully capture what we believe to be a representation of the existing condition. The plan is to combine the data that's included in this report with the data that we received through phase 1 of community engagement. So this is the feedback that we received tonight from you all, from the other committees that we'll be meeting with, as well as the results that we get out of the online survey and through the other means that we're communicating and engaging with the community. Key findings from the existing conditions report are in the staff report. And the existing condition report does, towards the end, conclude with a list of the potential crossing opportunities that we'll be talking about this evening as well. Those were developed based on the existing conditions data, as well as other feasibility considerations. Now, the next 2 slides hinted that I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the bike ped accessibility analysis, as well as the big data analysis sections in the existing conditions report. Just recognizing that some of this information is technical, but I think it's important for the commissioners to understand it as well as the general public. So first with the bike ped accessibility analysis. So starting on packet page 109, this is the section where we're focusing on the network accessibility analysis. And this was calculated using GIS, or Geographic Information System, to estimate travel times from the existing rail crossings. So this is along the existing street network. Just to clarify, this is not as the crow flies or a straight line. This is actually along the existing travel network. Travel times are shown in 5, 10, and 15-minute increments. And those are shown in using a variety of different colors. And this analysis tells a story of how long it takes to walk or bike to or from the existing crossings, and illustrates areas where there's limited east-west connectivity in the study area. So with any calculation, there are inputs. So what were the key inputs for these? I think there are, what did I write down? I wrote down four key inputs I think there's important to understand in these calculations. The first is that we only included the crossings at Cal Ave, Meadow, Charleston, and the San Antonio Caltrain Station bike ped underpass. So those are the main crossings where bikes and peds can cross a railroad corridor within the study area or immediately adjacent. The second key input is that we used a walk speed of 3 miles an hour. This is considered on the lower end of walking speeds. It's typically used for calculating walk times at signalized intersections. The third key input is that we used a bike speed of 10 miles an hour. Again, this is also considered on the lower end of biking speeds to account for things like stopping at intersections along the way. And then 4, we assumed bicyclists would not travel along high-stress streets or cross any high-stress intersections. And this builds off of an analysis that was done earlier in the report. That's on packet page 91 and 92. That includes the bicycle level of traffic stress analysis. So we're building off of the work that was done earlier in that report. Next slide, please. Okay, next I'll talk a little bit about the big data analysis. So this is starting on page 112 of your packet. And so this presents an analysis of travel patterns using big data, and it includes trip origins and destinations. So on your screen, you see the figure shown there. This is the origins and destinations results from that analysis. But we're also able to get information about trip lengths, trip purpose, and travel mode, all from a big data provider called Replica. So for those who aren't familiar with that data provider, Replica uses a blend of GPS location, land use, census, economic activity, and other data sources to calculate those travel patterns. A few clarifications in this analysis that I think are important to understand. First is that we use data from spring of 2024, representing average weekday and weekend conditions for all trip purposes. So it's not just commute trips, it's all trip purposes. The big data analysis presents the results in terms of person trips, and this is different from other trip terms that are defined and used early in the report. So for example, vehicle trips is another term that's used. A person trip, so just to give you a quick example, 2 people in a car taking a trip, that's considered 2 person trips, but it's also considered 1 vehicle trip. So just want to emphasize that. Another thing to clarify too, and when we say trips, that's considered a one-way trip. So you travel from home to work, that's 1 trip. You travel from work back to home, that's another trip. So much like I did on the previous slide, talking about our inputs and how did we filter this analysis, I think there's 2 key things to mention here. First is that the big data analysis shows information on one-way trips that are, we only included trips that are less than 5 miles in length. We only included trips that cross the railroad at Cal Ave, Oregon, Page Mill, Meadow, Charleston, San Antonio, and in the San Antonio Road Bike Ped Underpass. So I think that's just kind of important to understand that the data presented in this section only includes those trips, less than 5 miles, and cross the Caltrain corridor within or near our study area. Okay. All right, so we'll talk quickly here, just a couple more slides. Just to emphasize again, or just repeat what's already in the existing conditions report, the potential crossing locations. So this is the locations that we've identified for further exploration as part of this project. We're looking for your feedback on where you think the city should be prioritizing new bicycle and pedestrian crossings. Next slide. Next, we have the draft design priorities. So these were identified based on project needs, goals, benefits, and themes that are documented in several plans and studies that I've previously brought up. These were shared with you in the agenda packet, and we're looking for your feedback on the draft design priorities as well. And then building on the draft design priorities, next slide, please. We have the draft evaluation criteria. And so the proposed criteria builds on the draft design priorities. So on your left, you see your design priorities that were carried forward from the previous slide. The next column lists the evaluation criteria, and then the column on your far right provides an additional explanation on how we plan to measure or calculate each one. And then we just have one final slide, a few questions just to help guide the conversation if you so choose. And I look forward to the discussion and hearing your feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Coles. Before we ask for public comment, do we have any clarifying questions from the commission? Let's see. Commissioner James.
Thank you. Appreciate the explanation, all the literature reviews. It was quite helpful. At times a little daunting, but do I understand that each of these crossings is we're looking at an underpass, and that overpasses are not possible or not being considered? And I suppose there's some highline wires there that make that kind of complicated, but I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. At this point, we're going to be exploring all options. But as you noted, the electrical wires for Caltrain would require any overpass to go fairly high, I think at least 30 feet or so, if I'm remembering.
Above them?
Above them, yeah, maybe even more for certain clearances. We haven't gotten to that level of detail at this point, but it's something that we will be exploring as we move into phase 2.
And do any of these data sets and assumptions or observations, do they take into account the imagined 6,000 more housing units that we're trying to get by 2031 or 2031?
Absolutely. So let's see, in the staff report and in the existing conditions report, we do have information that talks about future land use growth for the city and where that growth will be occurring. Part of our design evaluation framework and what we've proposed includes looking at what we believe to be the anticipated demand for future crossings, and that will account for future populations and what's planned for the city currently.
And that was the map that showed, for instance, like the Matador Creek corridor had particularly high, I think, sort of projection.
It depends which map you're speaking of.
I'm sorry, I
you
don't
can
have.
clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were
Anyway,
a lot of maps there. Yeah.
So, yeah, and my other questions were about how long this is going to take, because I'm got a 4-year term and I see things from 2013 here, and I'd just love to see us make a decision and break ground and build something before I have to leave. But I saw you did have a nice graphic on what the projection, the timeline was. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner James. So we have a lot of requests here. I hope I have them in order, but I apologize in advance if I don't. Commissioner G.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions. Do you mind pulling up the slide deck again? Can we go to slide 10, please? Yes, thank you. I believe this is also referred to as packet page 109 for those looking on the packet, although there's a little discrepancy. So anyway, I was curious about the definition of the area size. Can we talk about why this area was chosen for the study area, like as opposed to maybe extending further beyond El Camino?
Yeah, so this was a staff level decision to really focus in on the rail corridor itself, recognizing that the city is also going through the process of updating its bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan, which takes the citywide look at the bicycle and pedestrian future proposed infrastructure. So the reason for the extents to Middlefield, and as you pointed out, to El Camino, is recognizing that no matter where the future crossings are located, we'll need to connect to the main bike and ped network. And so we believed that extending to El Camino and Middlefield and south of Oregon Expressway would give us plenty of space to be able to do that.
I guess the follow-up question there is, it looks like, I mean, if we assume that the rail crossing should be at the center, wouldn't we expect that the area extend equidistant on both sides of the train? Like it extends all the way to Middlefield on one side and extends only to El Camino on the other side?
So Sylvia Starlack, Transportation Planning Manager. I think that for the purposes of this analysis, extending to the next major parallel car, like street makes sense, east and west. And so for El Camino, for the west side, that would be El Camino. And for the east side, that would be Middlefield. Those are the major arterials. So that it makes sense from a network analysis perspective, but you'd want to go all the way out to those.
Totally get that. I think my comment there is just, actually, I'll save my comment for the comment period. I'll just continue asking questions. Okay. Now I'm going to ask about packet page 108. It's the graphs with the bicycle crossing and the pedestrian crossing. can you help me understand why these times were particularly picked between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m.?
I think you may have a different packet page than what we have.
Oh, yeah. I know Veronica said that there was a slight offset. Yeah, I guess any of the Kittleson pages between 49 and 51. I'm wondering about the timing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so the data used for the majority, if not all of this section, we actually used traffic counts that were collected as part of the BPTP update. So that was done back in 2024. Looks like May of 2024. And so Sylvia, I don't know if you have additional context as to why the times were chosen. Typically, you focus on the peak periods. For this data collection effort, it was more comprehensive, looking at the full daytime when you see most biking and pedestrian activity. So I imagine that was part of the discussion back then.
Thank you. I'll reserve my comments for that in the comment section. And then can we pull up the slide again, Veronica? Same slide 10. It's the one with yes, this one. I'm looking at the diagram on the right, which is Kittleson page 55 / maybe packet page 113 or nearby, which is the diagram on the right here on the slide. I'm looking in and zooming in kind of in the area that is at the corner between Los Robles and El Camino Way. So if you kind of see the triangle that's kind of in the middle of the diagram and then a little bit to the left side there, I'm wondering why this area is included in the 15-minute walk, but not included in any of the biking areas. That seems a little bit confusing to me because I'd assume that the biking area is a superset on top of all of the walking areas.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can take a first pass at answering this, but I'll also just queue up Amanda on the line to help kind of add or clarify what I say here. So the walking access and the biking access, those were done separately. The key difference here is that the biking access only assumes cyclists would travel along a network that wasn't characterized as a LTS4 or a high stress network, as well as an intersection. So a cyclist wouldn't cross through an intersection that's considered to be high stress or LTS4.
Thank you. That's the answer I expected. But actually, my understanding based on the BPTP update is actually that intersection is considered a safe routes to school for children. And so it's a little bit confusing to me that we're simultaneously saying that this is LTS4, but also saying that this is a safe route to school.
Did you want a response to that? Okay. Can you specify which intersection you mean?
Yes, the corner of Los Robles and El Camino Real.
Yes, so we do provide a crossing guard there, recognizing that it is a difficult crossing for students. So that is why it's on the route. But there's no, there are limited places where students can cross on El Camino.
Can I interject here? Just to clarify, you provide a crossing guard for half of that street. Half. It doesn't cover the entire street. And that is high stress for me when I walked across it every day for 2 years, taking my son back and forth to school. And for the people that I witnessed get hit in that intersection. So I'm going to push back on that. And I'm going to say also, just to support Commissioner G, all the way down Los Robles towards Gunn should have been measured. That is actually, I saw another collision there this week with a bicyclist and a car, a high schooler going to their AP test. So this is something we need to study and take a lot more seriously. Sorry to interject. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, just requesting that that comments be made and shared as suggestions for additional studies.
And that's exactly how it was intended. Thank you for clarifying
Thank
that.
Yes, very valuable comment. Thank you. And
Sorry,
we will
one
go
more
back
question.
to clarifying questions. Commissioner G.
Yes, apologies. One more clarifying question. I don't actually know which slide it is. It's the one with the trips back and forth. I think it's after this slide somewhere. Yes, this one. Slide 11, packet page 117-ish / Kittleson page 61. So when you're talking about trips here, is this the sum of the trips, or how are we calculating this here?
Yeah, I'll start and then cue up Amanda Leahy from Kittleson Associates to expand. So the data presented, for the most part in the entire big data section, presents the data as rates. So you can see in the lower left-hand corner in the legends on these figures, it's presented as trips per square mile. So they're ratios rather than exact number of trips. Amanda, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like, if you're on the line and would like to chime in here and expand on that.
Yeah, hey, I think that is a great description. It is trip starts or ends per 10,000. So right, it is not exactly a ratio, it is a number.
Wait, yeah, sorry, can we clarify that a little bit more? 10,000 what? 10,000 people? 10,000 square feet? 10,000, I guess.
Oh, sorry. So no, so the shading refers to the number of trips per square mile.
Okay,
So the
so
lighter shading is fewer than 10,000 trips.
Okay.
And the darkest is over 40,000 trips. And by trips, that's trip starts or ends.
Yeah, so then that begs the next question, which is over, I guess, what kind of period? I guess it doesn't really matter the period of time, but like, because they're all the same. But you just to clarify my original question, it is the sum of the trip starts and ends.
Over the average weekday or weekend. So over a 1 day period.
Okay, thank you. That ends my clarifying question, and I'm done, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So our task tonight is you're hoping to get a sort of a recommendation from us on a couple of new crossings of the railroad out of options A through F. And so to do that, we have to start with a baseline of what crossings are we considering already in existence. And so I have a question on packet page 42 and 43. At the very bottom, there's a reference to ongoing projects. I hope your numbers are the same as mine. It's the very end of 42. Ongoing and upcoming transportation projects in the study area include the rail grade separation projects for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians at Meadow Drive and Charleston Road. Do you see that?
It's
that's in.
I'm familiar.
page 3
I'm
of
familiar
10.
with it.
Page 3 of 10 of your report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So when I look at the diagram of A through F, I think those projects are shown with circles as, and so but they don't exist today, I don't think. And so, but what we're talking about here has a long time horizon. So in our analysis and recommendation to you, should we, first of all, can you just tell me a little bit more about those two projects? And should we consider that by the time whichever of A through F might go forward, these are going to be going forward too, or be done? That's the first question.
Yeah, thank you for that. If you wouldn't mind, Veronica, can you pull up slide 12, please? So you're absolutely right. So the rail grade separation projects that the city is also working on. This project, what we're calling the South Palo Alto Bike Ped Connectivity Project, is in addition to, right? So the rail grade separation projects are grade separation projects focusing at Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston. Meadow and Charleston is in our study area, and those are identified here with the smaller gray dots. You see the crossing opportunity location D is located somewhere in between those. We consider that to be a separate grade separated, future potential location for a grade separated crossing for bikes and peds only.
Okay.
So hopefully that clarifies.
It does. Yeah, thank you. That helps, I think, frame the recommendations we might made. And then the other question I had is on packet page, Kittleson, page 21, which is a figure 4 population growth. So I don't know if you have a color version of it, because the black and white is impossible to use here. But in fact, you probably need it. So what caught my eye is in the color version, there's a really large area that appears to have the shading of somewhere between population growth, 2 shades, 751 to 2,500 and more than 2,500. Are you able to see that? So
could we pull it up on the screen so that the public can see?
That'd be great. Right. Again, Kittleson, page 21 in color.
We also have slide 19, Veronica, or that works as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So it looks to me like the area that includes the words Lewis Road, I'm talking about this orangish, big orangish area up along Bayshore Road, right? And it looks like the northerly part in which Lewis Road is written, that's actually the darker color, which has, according to this table, more than 2,500, I'm guessing that's people, population growth anticipated by 2031. And then the area to the south of that, which is larger, but a little lighter, that would be population growth in the 751 to 2,500. So I know that in our housing element, the portion of that orange area that's kind of tucked up against Bayshore and wrapping San Antonio, that's a lot of our housing opportunity sites. But this orange area seems like larger than that. Like the area at Loma Verde and Lewis, for example, that's single family neighborhoods that I didn't think were part of the housing opportunity sites. I thought those were avoided in our looking for housing sites. So I just wanted to I think all of these tables are very challenging to put together. And so I just wanted to flag that as this moves forward. It's a long project. Take a look at that population growth, whatever assumptions are built into that generated this, because I think that might be larger than you intended to capture. So now that I think I understand it. All right, those were my questions. And I'm sorry, I guess the second one was more of a comment than a question.
Thank you. And next is Vice Chair Chang.
It's hard to know your list. You do one at a time. So if you tell the next person to get.
So my overall contextual question for this is, I know that we're expected to have council look at like the final recommendations from this in 2026, but bigger picture, has this been like, are these two crossings kind of budgeted for, or are there, like as we look at feasibility, is there some, or as you know, you go on in the next stages of this and look at feasibility, is there a number or something where we know that if a design exceeds this number, that it would then therefore become infeasible? Or is this going to go the route of the 2013 plan and just like poof, disappear? I'm just wondering if you could help provide the background on what the will is for council to like actually do this.
Yeah, with regards to the will, I'm sure Sylvia can maybe speak to this better than I can. But just to provide a little bit of context with how the project team is thinking about it, a big part of this project, especially as we get towards the end, when we're starting to have design concepts and getting close to having council approval for the two designs to move forward, we hope to be applying for variety of funding sources to be able to fund the next steps, which would be developing 35% designs, getting to final designs, going through environmental review, and then ultimately construction. And as you move down the line, things get more expensive. And so we anticipate there being multiple grant applications to support this. At least that's how we're thinking about it. Sylvia, I don't know if there's any additional context from the council perspective that you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think this, well, this project actually, I think maybe even predates the rail grade separation project. I mean, people have been looking at our bike network for years and have said we need more crossings of the rail. So I'll say that first. Then rail grade, though I might have the order wrong, but rail grade conversation definitely pointed this up, particularly when thinking about construction impacts. I mean, I think it is our intention to always maintain bicycle and pedestrian access across the rail, even during construction. But in the case that this is not feasible, I think council actually directed us to, hire somebody like Charlie to lead a project to identify these locations so that we could be ready, perhaps even ahead of rail grade construction with crossings so that, for example, school access to Gunn and Fletcher, I don't know if Fletcher comes from across, but I guess with their new sustainability program, they probably do come across. Anyway, so that students accessing those schools could actually get across if Charleston and Meadow were not open.
That's heartening to hear. So let's hope that this happens. Kind of the follow on to that is, what's our sense of what the timing of this would look like? Is this 10 years away then? Or is it?
We like to measure things in terms of planning commissioner terms.
Yeah, it's difficult to answer at this point. This project, we're hoping to complete summer of 2026. And again, the end goal is 15% design. So even getting to that stage is going to take, year and a half from now or so.
Okay, so that's a good segue for me for my next question. So on packet page 46, and I might need to translate that into, so it's report page 7. In the next step section, there's a sentence that says that the final evaluation criteria will be selected based on how well they facilitate evaluation against the overarching set of established priorities, which makes sense. And then the second part of the sentence says, and how effectively they differentiate alternatives. So my question is the thought that we are going to be, like the final selection of criteria is going to happen after the alternatives are already chosen? Because that seems like yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the outcome of phase 1, the community engagement phase that we're in right now, is to establish the design criteria. So that will be the design criteria for how we evaluate alternatives during phase 2. So the evaluation of alternatives will be in phase 2. We won't be adjusting the design evaluation criteria.
Great, thank you. That's great to hear. Otherwise, it's like a moral hazard problem. Okay, and then, but in the selection of the criteria, we're hoping to, without knowing what the alternatives are, choose ones that will help us differentiate the future alternatives. Got it. Okay. So then, if we look at packet pages 118 and 19, so I'm going to have to translate that again. I think these are these same maps that we've been looking. Oh, nope, different. We have 2 different sets of package. Okay, so these are the same origin destination maps that Commissioner G was asking about. So it's Kittleson, page 60 and 61. So I understand now what the shading is about, but if you look at the shaded areas, they're particularly strangely shaped. So for example, if you look at page 60, there's like a big panhandle, right? And well, you see it on both of them. So how were those areas chosen? Because I understand that we're doing counts per square mile, but we're not, we're not seeing a bunch of pixels here. So how are we looking at this? And is it causing, this is an overall data question, because I think it might also address the question that Commissioner Heckman had asked. So I'm just wondering about sort of like how the data comes in. Is that what's driving the shapes of these areas?
Thanks for the question. So we define the shapes, and the shapes are the same, what they're called transportation analysis zones that are in the VTA, Valley Transportation Authority model. So we are using the same, what they're called TAZs, or transportation analysis zones, that are in the VTA model. And we did this for the big data analysis to be able to compare to other data sources that we are using from the VTA model, much like Commissioner Hetchman was pointing out. Those are the same shapes.
So that's why, like, when we're looking at the population growth map, the population growth is actually going to occur in a much more narrow area, but these areas were chosen to match VTA data. Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. All right, I think that's it for my questions for now. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Peterson, followed by Commissioner Templeton.
All right. Can we put the map back up with the walk analysis? I think it was the 5-minute. And while we're getting there, I just want to say how much I appreciate this, being that I use the Caltrain and I walk, that this looks very familiar, because if you're a walker in Palo Alto, this is essentially what Palo Alto does look like. You're locked into the Caltrain stations, and my kids use the Caltrain stations, and they go to San Antonio to go to the movies and come back on their own. And so 2 questions on this. One of them is are we covering, I know we're not the art commission, but if anyone's noticed, the Caltrain stations don't necessarily have no one really put any money into the budget for the art station. I don't think there's a single art installation at either CalAv or San Antonio. Palo Alto station is basically like an Art Deco on its own, so it doesn't need anything.
So does this constitute a clarifying question?
It is.
Okay.
So those stations are operated by Caltrain?
So I thought the answer would be, we don't get to, is there a way we can put art like and point it towards the station from like over the boundary?
So we have at CalAv, right? There's the fountain and so we do what we can. That's right. There's the mural in the CalAv underpass.
Yeah. Okay. So that answers the question on the art. I was almost certain that was going to be the answer on that. So the other one is I can give you some bonus points here on the transportation here. Let's see. Can we zoom in and can I draw on the screen? I think I'm able to draw on here, aren't I? Let's see. Bottom left. There it is. I saw it. All right. Can we zoom in? Make the walking map. I'm a walker, so zoom in to the walking map as far as we can. A little bit more. Is there any way to go towards CalAb a little bit? We're on the bike. That's the bike map. Yeah, the other map. There we go. All right. So I'll see how well I can draw here. So I think there's a flaw in the data set, which there always is, of course, right? These aren't perfect, especially if it's VTA and it's covering the whole region. And what's the odds they got this one little street right? But I brought this up a while back that there's a walking path that's just not recognized as a walking path, which is the one I happen to use because to get to Cal Ave, there is a huge, what do you call a apartment complex there with locked gates. So even though it looks like the train station's right there, well, you actually have to walk around, but there's a shortcut here. And let's see, right? Oops. Let's use red. Can I change the size of here we go. Oh, just right there.
Oh, it's not showing for us. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. Oop, we were there. Okay, let's try it one more time. Now, I know this is like leading theory too. We have to do this in class at Stanford to make sure we have the students all draw on the screen. It's supposed to be the difference between understanding and not understanding. So there is an old bridge at the back of the parking lot for the Caltrain station. And I don't think this analysis took that into account because that would mean if you use, because, Oregon Expressway is essentially like, it's like a medieval level, like fortress level of something to cross. It really bisects the city. But that old bridge, you can walk across. You're basically in no man's land. It's an RV zone essentially because nobody's back there, but it's a shortcut to get to Ventura from the Caltrain station, and everybody uses it. As soon as anybody gets off that Caltrain, half the people head for Cal Ave, the other half cross that little bridge for Ventura, try not to get run over by somebody coming across the bridge. But so the walkability here is clearly, that whole Ventura there. See, you've done a great job. You have solved the walkability of North Ventura.
I wish we had. That bridge is a vehicle bridge.
Yes.
There is no sidewalk, no formal sidewalk on there.
You have to walk in the middle of it so you don't get hit.
Right, which this analysis would not have allowed.
Interesting.
I believe, because I think they only use places where there were sidewalks.
Right.
So, someone in a wheelchair would have to be in the road.
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
I assume that was probably the answer to it as well. But I just want to reinforce that it is a great walking path. It's used as a walking path. If it could be solved, the bridge would probably have to be a one-way bridge or turned into a walking bridge only. But I think there is a de facto walking path from basically from Piers Park down across Cal Avenue through the parking lot of the Caltrain station and on through Ventura that is unsafe, but I think with some attention, it could be made safe. Thank you.
Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for the heads up of giving the next speaker when we're backlogged like that. That's very helpful for me, so I don't get excited and then disappointed 5 times in a row. I'm going to acknowledge again that I know why we're here, and that is to give you feedback. And I will acknowledge again that I'm excited about all this stuff, and sometimes that's going to come across as pretty intense. And I don't mean it in any way against any individual here. But I've also got history of trying to work on these issues, and it's pretty frustrating to be confronted with the lack of change over the years with some of these issues. So that's not you personally. I don't know how long you've been working on this. Doesn't mean it's the same amount of time I have. So that's all caveated. I just want to circle back to what Commissioner G said. These are also my comments. Let's please bring up that map again. As someone who lives in this part of Palo Alto, I am surprised. Let's zoom back out, and we want to look at the one, I really don't know how one can talk about these things without sufficiently covering Barron Park. It's really unimaginable. There is so much foot and bike traffic happening in Barron Park, and I would say it's equivalent, if not in excess of what's happening in other parts of the city. We have a major high school and a major middle school there, not to mention 2 elementary schools in this neighborhood. And it's just really unimaginable that those are considered low risk or whatever it's called, intersections. So I'm telling you this because we're on the record, because we're talking about Barron Park, and because we need to make sure that the team, not necessarily an individual here, and I know you are passionate about all the stuff that's happening on bikes and pedestrians, and you know this, but what we're seeing reflected here does not reflect my experience in the 20 years living in Palo Alto. So I would encourage you to figure out what the root cause is of why that's not being studied or included, and address it before the next phase of the project. Because if this comes back and it is as incomplete, we're not going to forget. We'll remind you again. Like, it's not personal, but it is personal to those of us that are living in this area. Okay, can we also go to the one that has the shades of blue and orange, please, the slide? And I'm just going to echo what Commissioner Heckman said about the color. My printout is entirely in black and white, which is fine, I understand, for economic reasons, but I would encourage anyone creating a map that they're going to print 50 pages of in black and white to use something discernible. I'm sure you have a copy of it now and you can see that there are tricks to doing that we have seen in other presentation elements from staff.
And they were requested to be printed in color, so that was intended to be provided in color.
Aw, that's very thoughtful. I wish that had happened. Anyway, okay, so looking at this, are these dark shades that are happening in the bottom right area, Target and Walmart? Like, is that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, so the data doesn't provide us with the granularity to tell you specifically what stores people are going to.
I'm not asking the
and
data, my
from.
friend. I mean,
Okay.
I think that's the area.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, but just to clarify, yeah, so this is what's it called, the San Antonio Center. So this is,
Yeah.
we when we see the data as it comes out, and we compare that with our understanding of the
Hold on,
local.
I'm going to interrupt you. You don't need to explain all. I get all that. I just wanted to make sure I was oriented because that's not in Palo Alto, right? So just trying to figure out, oh, we have what's shown here are shopping hubs, right? The shopping center nearest us in Mountain View and California Avenue. Okay. Where is Gunn on this? So I'm gonna just conjecture that Gunn has a very large number of trips given the size of the school. Is there a reason that would it be a darker color, or was it simply not studied?
It was studied and it's shown there. The
Where?
shape of Gunn High School, you can see.
I see the green part.
Overlaps
Oh,
with.
is it blue over it?
Yeah, so there's what looks like on my screen, a light kind of yellow shading representing the shape of the property that represents Gunn High School. That's where Gunn High School is located. The Gunn High School, calling it property, does cover a couple of the transportation analysis zones that I was mentioning. So the polygons that you see. So to answer your question, it was included in the analysis.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was not visible on the version I had, but I see it zoomed in that there's a blue overlaying the other color that's there. Okay, so what strikes me here is possibly an improvement to your map, because Gunn High School has fluctuating demand on our transportation systems that's very connected to the schedule, but that destroys the movement on Arastradero twice a day. And so it's not, this diagram as it's designed is not reflective of the traffic situation. I would say I'd rather go to Target than to Gun at 8 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, right? Like, given that I have to drive this path to get to and from school for my kids, I'm experiencing it and it's pretty painful. So the reason I'm telling you that is, are we designing for the average or the maximum use? And what would be the most useful to show to the council when they're making decisions? Okay, so that's priorities on page 167. Okay. Do you want feedback on this list of priorities? Yes?
We're on clarifying questions now. I hope to organize the rest of the discussion so that we get a
This
focused
was my
session on the
first,
priorities.
I waited 30 minutes to ask this question. I would love to ask it now, Chair. Would you be willing to indulge me?
If it's a clarifying question, sure.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. That's why I said I was going to go ahead and ask it. So on that note, I was very patient and waited my turn. I'm going to ask my question. So the question is, why are we not talking about the other reasons for crossing, like connecting neighborhoods? And I bring this up because people that need to connect with their friends, I don't see anything like that. Do you think that there's something in here that's including personal relationships? There's a story that I'm not going to get into. It's very sad about people trying to connect with their friends at Gun High School that lived in East Palo Alto and had a difficult time reaching them. And I think the same is true about people that live across the train tracks. And I don't know where that is in here. Did you intend to include it? Is that the kind of feedback you'd be looking for?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. Yeah, thanks for that perspective. This is the exact kind of feedback we're looking for. So.
Well, I will get into that. And personal security, I assume, is separate from safety. In other words, not dying when you are on the railroad tracks.
So I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
I'm
You're
trying to
asking-
distinguish if personal security includes safety.
It does.
Okay.
Safety can be somewhat of a broad term. I
It
think
looks like it's crime focused, and I was wondering, I'm thinking about particularly the suicides on the train tracks, and that is not shown as a consideration. So I'm asking specifically if you're including that in crime or if that's something we could potentially add in the future.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so crime prevention through environmental design. So this is a standard of practice where you're designing a facility to discourage unwanted behavior, so to speak, is maybe the simplest way to explain that. So you could think of this like including ample lighting, making sure that there are direct lines of paths so that more people can see into this area, more eyes on the street, so to speak, in theory prevents people from doing unwanted types of behaviors. So hopefully that clarifies what this definition has been, how it's been written. But again, we're open to feedback and we appreciate your perspectives.
We'll get into it more later. I was thinking more along the lines of preventing sexual assaults at underpassings, which is something we've had to deal with at the California Avenue. And we definitely want to do that. And we also want to have safer crossings that don't provide opportunities for impulsive, undesirable actions affected by other mechanisms. Okay, that's all for now. The rail grading. The other thing I want to clarify, because it didn't get brought up, is I was on the XCAP and we talked a lot about how important these crossings are at that time. I think that was oh no, it must have been 2019 that we talked about it. And I'm sure it pre-existed that conversation as well. But the primary learning there was that around the Loma Verde is such a long stretch either way to bike that we really would like to see an underpass at that time, at that place. So that was the major feedback from the group of 20 or so people working on how to best provide an underpass. Thank you.
Thank you all. Fortunately, most of my clarifying questions have already been covered, which is exactly as I expected. But I do have a couple left. You've heard a good bit of feedback. I made notes about figure 4, figure 23, figure 19, about how well the existing conditions report is communicating its conclusions and its data. So the clarifying question, I guess, is how much feedback do you want on the existing conditions report, or is that already cast in concrete?
Yeah, appreciate the question. We're open to all feedback. I think this is helpful for us as professionals as we're moving through this project to be taking this feedback into consideration as it comes. That we do have a published existing conditions report. We will be using that report throughout the project, and we want to make sure we have it right. There will be opportunities to summarize, present the data as we move through the project again and again. We will have a final plan, which will likely have an existing conditions chapter. So there are opportunities for refinement. Thank you.
Yeah, given the mechanisms that you're using, I understand why it's difficult to create graphics that might be the most informative, because there are limits on the resolution and character of the data. But perhaps additional explanation might be worthwhile. And the last question I have for clarifying is concerns a little bit about our process for the rest of the discussion. And this dovetails with one of Vice Chair Chang's questions. So I was surprised to see in the staff report the order in which you were seeking feedback. First, to prioritize crossing locations, and then second, to provide feedback on the evaluation framework. So I know that one of the criteria that I would use to prioritize locations is not in the existing evaluation framework. So my inclination would be to try and get feedback on that first, and then to move to locations. So was there a reason you wanted to do it the other way, or is it unimportant from your point of view?
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I'm happy to, for the conversation to proceed however you feel appropriate, though I would just clarify that we're really not looking for any kind of final decision on where the future crossing locations would be. This is merely an exercise to get early input and bring the community along through the process. And it also gives the project team with some important information about where the community thinks we should be prioritizing our efforts. Because we are limited in scope and schedule, we do need to prioritize.
Sure. All right, I see we have another clarifying question from Commissioner Peterson.
The Churchill Viaduct, what are you looking for regarding that? Or is that outside the discussion?
Yeah, that would be outside of the this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner James.
Just one last question. A number of the locations to be considered, the A through F, align with creeks. And it may be obvious to others why that is, but it's not obvious to me. And I wonder if you could just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. So many of the locations presented in this in the staff report and the existing conditions report builds off of previously identified locations. It also includes locations that us as professionals have identified through our review of the existing conditions data, as well as through field visits and things of that sort. So the creek crossings have come up multiple times, and they're seen as areas where there's available right of way to work with, potentially. So that's my understanding of why they've been brought up in previous studies and are presented again here.
So I'm just, so there is a right-of-way advantage that's adjacent to those creeks? Or there may be?
There may be. It's just recognizing space, that there's potentially space to work with.
On either side?
On
Or
either
directly adjacent to?
right, and on either side of the Caltrain corridor.
Okay, so it does in no way sort of makes construction easier or, I mean, there's obviously existing infrastructure, but I'm just, you know, curious what I mean, they seem very attractive in a certain way. It's the only open space along the whole corridor pretty much. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I fully understood why we aligned so many times with creeks.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. So based on our understanding with engineers on the team, that when you actually start doing work around the creeks, things can become more complicated. There was the Matador, it's the Midtown Connector Feasibility Study. It's a document that's mentioned in the existing conditions report that looked at alignments through Midtown along Matadero Creek. And some of those similar complications came up through that process, is my understanding, even though that project's, the final plan was dated 2016.
Right. I see no other clarifying question requests. So we have an opportunity here for public comment. Ms. Dow, do we have any commenters?
I have no speakers.
Very good. If my fellow commissioners are amenable, we can proceed to the next part of the discussion. If anyone needs a break, we can also arrange that. All right, I have one request for a break. So 8 o'clock, let's do that. Can we do this in 5 minutes or do we need 10? All right, 5-minute break then, please. Welcome back, everyone. So I would like to set a frame to continue the rest of the discussion. If we have further questions about the existing conditions report, let's try and get those out of the way first so that the rest of the discussion, we're all fully informed. I suspect after the clarifying questions, we may not have any, but I'd like to cover them, like to reserve a space for that just in case. And then I think the best approach is to review the draft design priorities and evaluation criteria next. That's partly because, as I suggested to Mr. Coles, we may have some suggestions there that affect how we prioritize the crossing options. So let's try and tackle those second. And then to wrap up, let's offer our advice about prioritizing the crossings. So if that's acceptable to everyone, then let's start off by seeing if anyone has any further comments or questions about the existing conditions report. Commissioner G.
Thank you, Chair. I think we'll know where we're going back to, slide 10. Great. I guess my commentary shouldn't come as a surprise, but I'm a little bit disappointed about the current size of the study area. I do think that the definition of the study area is particularly important for this project. In fact, in the entire in the existing studies conditions report, the study area is named by name 153 times, meaning it's very used for the calculations that we might use the existing criteria, the defining criteria for. So I think it's very important to consider how we define the study area. Personally, I think that the study area should extend pretty significantly further. I guess we'll just say bottom left. I get my geography a little bit confused given the angle, but into the Barron Park neighborhood, especially because in the existing conditions report, there's a lot of discussion of major destinations that are in that area. The one I think about particularly is Gunn High School and other nearby schools. I think that it's a little bit misleading to not include a significant portion of Raspadero Road when defining the study area. So that's my comment there. And then I want to go back to another point that I made during my clarifying questions about the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. time slot, which is that living pretty smack dab in the middle of this section, I'll tell you right now that the busy times can extend significantly past 7. If I were to leave my house at 7, I would still be very congested. And so I think that we should be extending the time period. In fact, the graph actually included in the existing conditions report only goes until 6, even though the study time period is defined as 7. So I think that there is an opportunity to collect more data there. And then I'll reiterate my concern for the LTS4 usage. I totally understand where we're coming from here with the LTS metric. But I do think maybe if it's just for the purposes of this discussion or this diagram or this report, that we do include the intersection at Los Robles and El Camino Real, which I've previously stated, into this diagram so as to better help the public and those deciding make a decision here. And then can we go to the next slide, the diagram? Yes, the one we've also been talking about a lot. A lot of the way I think about it is I think it's important to think about not just trips to and from collectively, but I think it's important to think about the exact route in which people are going, right? If for example, the route is, I don't know, from Ventura to Cal Ave, right? There's not very much the crossing is going to impact, but I think it's if we have the data, which it seems like we do have this available, to be able to kind of draw some kind of diagram that shows the heavy routes of where people are going instead of having the to and from layered and stacked on top of each other, I think would be pretty useful for that. And then, yeah, and then I think I have a couple other small nit comments, which is on packet page 141 on the bottom, figure 3, Palo Alto 2012 VPTP Bike Boulevard Network. That diagram's just not readable. So just a small comment. It's neither readable on the digital version or on the paper version. And then those are all of my comments for now on the existing conditions report. Thank you.
Thank you. And next I have Vice Chair Chang and then Commissioner Peterson.
So once we move on to discussion about criteria, I think this comment will become much more obvious, but I think it would be really valuable. So there, in the narrative, there's quite a lot of information about kind of big destinations that folks are headed to. I think it would be helpful to have a map that actually just showed those destinations, because as we looked at those, the two maps that were blue and orange in the presentation, I understand why the blocks, the polygons were crafted as is, but as a result, and also as a result of the measurement, which I think is like per square mile, what we don't see are like these real hot spots. So something like Gun is a hot spot where if it, like, a Gun's area, I think, is much less than a square mile. And Gun on the map also spans like 2 different polygons. So I think it would be really valuable to do that, to see that. Okay, then another question I had was around, this is just more broadly a clarifying question that I should have asked. In the staff report, when you were looking at the draft design priorities, so this is staff report page 5, and it's also in the appendices again. There's a priority that's called enhanced user experience, and it talks about vulnerable populations. And so what does vulnerable populations mean? So this is just a clarifying question, so that later on when we move on to the discussion of the actual priorities, we have a common understanding.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that now. Thank you for the question. So typically when we think of vulnerable populations, we think of people who have difficulty moving. So people who may be handicapped, have visual impairments, things of those sorts.
Okay, so students, for example, then wouldn't be, I mean, so in general, when I think about vulnerable populations in the context of traffic safety, I think of all peds and bikes. In addition, so I mean, I think there's many different ways of looking at it. So I just wanted to understand what was meant by vulnerable populations in the report.
Yeah, children, seniors, this is intended to be a bicycle and pedestrian facility, so it will be for all bikes and peds. So,
okay, so
yeah,
not, because I know that there was information about sort of, in addition to physical challenges or age or mobility challenges, there's also something in the report also about socioeconomic challenges. And is that also included in the vulnerable populations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great comment. I think I think this is the type of feedback we're looking for through this. So.
Okay, I don't know that I have a perspective on that. I just wanted clarification. So thanks.
Next, I have Commissioner Peterson and then Commissioner Templeton.
All right, thank you, Chair. Can we go to slide number 10? All right, let's zoom in on the walk path again, and I'm going to do some drawing here. All right. So I'm going to push back a little bit on the idea of redefining the boundaries. And also I want to say or we call it the GIS or the geese. I guess it depends on whether in Europe or the US, but I really appreciate the data analysis that came in with this. I know that it came from a consultant, and I just want to say that I do appreciate this. I think it's informative having somebody have done the walking, analysis here, a simulation or whatever it is that came up these times. So one of the things that stands out to me, having this type of multi-dimensional data with color and dimension is that I heard you say that El Camino can be a barrier to crossing. And one of the things that stands out to me in that is that when we talk about the El Camino corridor for affordable housing, we consider the housing on both sides of El Camino. But this is indicating that maybe affordable housing is more applicable to one side of El Camino on the other, simply because it has access to one, crossing the railroad tracks, but also for me, more importantly, I think accessing the Caltrain stations for the transportation. I was a daily commuter for 2 years to San Francisco. It was great. We had a startup office there, and I've commuted to San Jose more times than I think I can remember. And the Caltrain is a great transportation mode. There's no traffic on the Caltrain. Other than the fact that a lot of the stations all look the same, it's the hazard of getting off at the wrong station. But sometimes that's fun because you get to walk around and check the place out. So can you just, elaborate a little bit on, is one side of El Camino, would you agree, probably better for affordable housing than the other side of El Camino? Even though when we think about it, we just think about it as a corridor. But if you take it in relation to the Caltrain corridor, now they become symbiotic corridors.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think I appreciate the question, and I don't want to opine on something that's maybe not directly related to the feedback that we're looking for today. But I do hear multiple questions from commissioners around the shape of the study area. And I maybe do want to just, if I may, take a moment, Chair, just to maybe provide a bit of clarification.
That's my question. Clarification.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you. So as you see in the existing conditions report, we have a variety of different data that we've pulled together. Some of that data is focused within what we're calling our study area, right? So there's a section in there that actually shows all the locations for where you have stop signs, signals, the pedestrian hybrid beacons, a lot of the existing pedestrian infrastructure, right? Because we needed to do a detailed look into what we're calling the study area, which is the area most adjacent to where these future rail crossings will be. Having said that, there are many other data sources that go well beyond the study area. The big data analysis, the bike and ped accessibility analysis, this recognizes that a future bicycle and pedestrian tunnel overpass will have a wide-ranging effect, citywide effect on travel. It has the potential to do that. So the study area, the way we're thinking about it, is merely to focus in closest to the rail, but recognizing that we are thinking of this as a potential to affect travel citywide, recognizing south of Oregon Expressway, what we're calling South Palo Alto, as most likely to be, benefit from a future crossing like this. So I hope that just clarifies a little bit about how we're thinking about what we're calling the study area. And I appreciate the graphics that you're putting up there. Thank you.
No problem.
Is that it, Commissioner Peters?
That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have Commissioner Templeton, then Commissioner Hackman.
Thank you. I agree that there is housing in the areas that are red. I think there's also additional housing on the other side of El Camino that deserves bike and pedestrian access and services as well. I'm sure that's not what you were implying, but nonetheless, I wanted to opine on that. I wanted to ask, I want to add to Vice Chair Chang's comments about additional things to consider vulnerabilities, and I would say mental illness should be included as a vulnerability, especially for people crossing the railroad tracks, as we have again and again and again and again and again had to experience as a community. I wanted to talk again about the orange and blue, because that's what the chair has asked us to talk about, the orange and blue graphs. I wonder if in a future version of this graph, you can identify these high traffic destinations by their likelihood to be adopted by more bike and pedestrian users. So for example, California Avenue, it's an area we really want to encourage bike and pedestrian users. Gun High School, we want as many as possible to get those cars off the road, right? However, you know, when I go to Target, I have to take the car. Right. Well, not you. I didn't say you don't. I said I do because I try not to go very often. So when I go, I bring a haul home. So, you know, but the point that Ms. Starlack is making is, of course, there are people who want to use that too, right? But there's what I'm trying to get at, and possibly I mentioned this earlier and I'm just trying another angle, is the way that it's depicted on the map gives an outsized priority to servicing that area versus the other two areas because of the way the shading is done, because it's not taking into account, you know, a smaller area, a targeted area, or times of day. So if there's a way that we can say, given these high traffic areas, these are the ones that we have a higher priority on for everyone versus for people with the facilities to have long haul biking and pedestrian trolleys. So, and at one time I did have that, but after the kids were old enough to bike on their own and I still had the trailer, I could go to Target, but I can't do that anymore. So, okay, that's all I want to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Heckman, then Commissioner G.
So I guess my question is, I'll ask the question, then I'll explain. What are we doing here tonight is my question. I thought the focus of this study session is for us to identify, hopefully some kind of consensus on two of the potential crossing locations, places to do an most likely underground crossing of the railroad track that doesn't exist today. That's what I thought we were here to do. But and these diagrams and the data and the criteria will help inform that choice. But I honestly think that I don't know how much they change that choice. Because one of the things we have to recognize is, first of all, I think staff did a good job of explaining that this study area is not, we're not limited to what's happening in the study area in making this decision. And in fact, I will preview for you that I like, one of the alternatives I like is E. And the reason I like E, which is not the most southerly, but the second most southerly, is I think that will best serve all of this new development near 101 in San Antonio, which is outside of the study area. But it's still addressed in a number of the diagrams that are included in the existing condition report. And so that's, I understand that we are looking at the city as a whole and really only focusing on sort of south of Page Mill, Oregon, because that's where the need is that at least we're discussing today. And so I want to confirm that's really what you'd like this evening to end with, is to see if there's consensus on a couple of rail crossings, because that's how I read the staff report. And I think it was number one on your list ahead of the criteria. Not necessarily that it was a higher priority, but I thought that was, it was one of the ones that was, identify the crossings, identify the criteria, and I can't remember what the third one was. But so that's what I'm asking is are you hoping that we'll give you our impressions of A through F, and you can see if there's some uniform direction among the commission toward pursuing those?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So to clarify, we are really looking for your perspectives on the locations A through F. We're not expecting a decision. We also would be open to hearing from your perspectives and your understanding of the local context. Are there certain things that we should be considering within the locations we've identified? Are there other locations that we've completely missed that we need to take a look at? So that's one level of input that we're looking to gather this evening, and that we're hoping to gather throughout all of the phase one community engagement, because that will help us to think through where we want to prioritize our efforts for coming up with design concepts. So as I've mentioned before, we have a scope of work with our project consultant team. And so we do have a limited number of crossing design concepts that we plan to come forward with the community with and share them during phase two, right? And so there's a set number, and we want to make sure that whatever we come forward with, at least the community has had an opportunity to weigh in early, and we'll have opportunities to weigh in again later throughout the project. The second point regarding the evaluation criteria, I understand there is a bit of a chicken and egg thing happening here, and I totally appreciate that. And again, just to emphasize, another outcome of phase one is to establish the evaluation framework for how we evaluate all alternatives, whatever they may be. We don't know what they're going to be during phase two. So I think the way that the chair has characterized it makes a lot of sense from our perspective, focusing on the evaluation criteria. That's most important, I would say, for this evening. Any input you can provide on the locations, that's also important.
Okay. And then in the long run, and maybe this is in phase two, a lot of the information you've provided in the various mapping is the existing condition. This is how traffic flows. This is how the bicyclists move back and forth. This is where the walkers walk, right? Once you have identified alternatives and you're studying them, at some point, will there be modeling about, okay, if we put those two undercrosses in those locations, this is where the people will bike and this is where the people will walk. Will we see that years from now? I'm just being realistic about
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, that question. Yes. So at least at this point, what we have included in the draft evaluation criteria, you see the second item down, demand. That is defined as the projected number of users during the weekday peak hour. So that's going to estimate the number of people during the peaks would use this future crossing. Yeah.
All right, I hope we can wrap up the comments on the existing conditions report quickly and then move on to the evaluation criteria. I have next Commissioner G and then Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Coles, for your explanation of the study area. So can you then clarify for me what exactly is the purpose of the study area as defined? I know that there's like lots of different data sets, but what are you particularly hoping to use the study area definition for?
Yeah, so again, as I stated, the definition of the study area was to focus in on collecting specific data that we know is going to be relevant for the project in its immediate vicinity. So that was why we have a defined study area.
Sure. But can you be more specific, right? Like my comment is, I feel like there are areas that are outside the study area that are also pretty important. And I am trying to just understand whether, like, what kinds of criteria are pertinent only to the study area that aren't pertinent to the other areas. Like why, like drawing the study area as such, if you were to draw it in a different way, what actual impact would you see across the decision making? Does that make sense?
It does. I think I see what you're getting at. My understanding is that it wouldn't have an impact on the decision making. It's really, again, and I hate to be repeating myself, but there's a certain level of granularity that we need, and most of that granularity needs to be closest to the rail corridor, because eventually we're going to need to come up with design concepts, and we need to know what intersection modifications are needed, what bike walk treatments are needed to be able to connect to and from the future rail crossings. As you start to expand, and if there are potential impacts to that future impacts to the overall network, those will also be explored. But I think I understand what you're asking, and hopefully that helps to clarify our understanding and kind of perspective of how we'll be approaching this project going forward.
So fundamentally, it's moderately arbitrary is kind of what you're saying? Is like, for example, if I were to draw it at, like, I don't know, Bryant instead of Middlefield, or I don't actually know where. Yeah, so let's say I use Bryant, right? It's equidistant between the rail crossing and El Camino, right? You're making a pretty fair area on both sides, right? So would this change the way in which we're doing any of the thinking about the study area?
Yeah, so I don't think that it would. I will also cue in Amanda with Kittleson and Associates to see if she has something that she would like to add.
Yes, sure. I will also say we have had multiple back and forths about where we draw the boundaries for this. When the project was described, it was simply the Caltrain corridor between Oregon Expressway and San Antonio. And talking with the project team, we knew we'd need to gather data beyond this area. We wanted to define a study area that made sense. And I think Sylvia described it well, like talking about the major parallel corridors that carried vehicle traffic. That is how we chose to define it. We are still, in the maps that we've talked about, we're showing transportation analysis zones outside of our study area. We also have data outside of our study area. So I suppose you did describe it well. It is somewhat moderately arbitrary, but we do need to have a cutoff somewhere. And we do still have data beyond this area. We are still analyzing it and summarizing it beyond this area. But we did want to put some boundary on where the project team would be identifying recommendations for network access and connections beyond the corridor crossing itself. So part of this project is looking at the on-street connections, and we will do that within the study area between Middlefield and El Camino Real and Oregon Expressway and San Antonio. So I think that's the best way we could describe it.
Thank you. I think you get where my feedback is going, so I won't kind of continue to reiterate. But I just think that given that you refer to the study area over 150 times in the report, I think it deserves some thought about how we're defining this in a hopefully not so arbitrary way. Thank you.
All right, I have Commissioner Templeton and then Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again, Commissioner G, for those comments. I am going to paraphrase, and feel free to interject if I get it wrong, but I I think what I'm hearing is, and what I identify with is this could be a good question for your next public meeting is, where do you think people who were affected by these crossings live? And I wonder, just listening to the commentary from staff, is perhaps that was not a consideration when you were deciding the boundaries that you have to have. If I were, as somebody who lives there, to create those boundaries, I would have included my neighborhood, because there's no more important intersections than those crossings for me in my life. That is constant. I have to wait and wait. And if I'm going to send my kid to bike to the library, which I like to do and he likes to do in the summer, I am afraid for him when I send him down Meadow, because he has to cross that crossing and El Camino. And so I don't think of El Camino as the boundary of where I start to care. Like, it's part of our life. Our life has to cross both of these major hazards regularly. So what you're hearing from the two people on this commission who live in the zone that you have constructed is, one was included but doesn't feel that that was a large enough zone. One was excluded and doesn't feel like that was a large enough zone. So that is something you could potentially get more input on when you go to the next community meeting. And I think it matters a lot. I think what you're going to do is going to change the lives of so many young people, especially, but the younger generation who are still actively biking, and those zippy older folks who are still biking are really going to benefit from this. So the reason you're hearing this passionate feedback again and again, because it doesn't seem to have landed, because what we're hearing back from you in response is, well, we had to choose something. And so that's not good enough. You can choose better. And I hope you do. Thank you.
So do you mind if I just jump on there? So I want to echo Commissioner Templeton's comments and also provide a little bit more color as to why I'm very passionate about this. I crossed this intersection starting from like age 6 by myself, basically, going to Fairmeadow Elementary School from this side. So I'm very intimately familiar. Starting in middle school, we were required to take classes at both JLS and Terman. And so I frequently crossed this intersection 4, 5, 10 times per day. And then when I went to Gunn, I crossed this intersection even more than that. And so I'm also very invested in, I think, what folks have talked about for vulnerable populations. My 84-year-old grandmother will bike across this intersection to come visit me. And so I'm like very personally attached to the safety and the selection for some of these choices. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Peterson, and then I'll try and wrap up the round with a few final comments.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have a slide with the crossings, proposed crossings?
I think it's early in the slide deck, maybe, Veronica.
There we go. The question I have is, these crossings essentially cross into a small, I don't want to call it an interstate, but Redwood City and Mountain View are almost like different countries. How do you get across Alma?
Yeah, so the intention is to look at that as part of this project, right? So one of the earlier slides in the presentation mentions a program in the comprehensive plan, and it states, if I were to pull it up, it mentions not only crossing the Caltrain corridor, but also Alma. So we'll be looking at that as part of this.
And then let me just make a comment that There was an unhoused person on California Avenue. He was a really nice guy. I used to talk with him. And he told me he couldn't get his cart under California Avenue because the way the gates were. Unfortunately, he passed away on like a really cold night. I don't know why he passed away, but he did. It was really cold. And but just put in that consideration, I think it's probably one population we don't always think about, but can I push a cart, through this underpass, and get it up the other side and all the rest? Because that was part of his life. And he was pretty cool because he actually kept the crime down on the street. He used to tell me, he's like, I chased everybody else away. So he used to always tell me. So I just want to make that comment. Probably a design consideration we don't always think of.
Commissioner Heckman, do you have a follow-up on the existing conditions report issues?
No, I'll pass.
Okay, we'll come back for the design criteria. All right. As staff knows, my main concern about the existing conditions analysis is that we get point samples, particularly about trip counts near the tracks, but we don't have much information about connectivity. And I just want to explain why I think that's important to think about more carefully in the next steps. Take a look at packet page 107. That's the vehicle crossings for Meadow and Charleston. That is Kittleson page 51. All right, so notice that there are, just look at the weekday chart, that's all you need. Notice that there are a lot more cars going westbound than eastbound. And that's true for both Charleston and Meadow. So what that suggests to me is that people are not making round trips back and forth on the same route. They're making loops. And that means they're crossing the tracks at least twice at different points. So an analysis that assumes that each crossing is independent of all the others won't capture the actual behavior, which is serially dependent. Where that comes into play is if you choose a crossing that meets the need for one part of a loop, but fail to choose a crossing that meets the need for the other part of the loop, then you don't get people taking the first part because they can't complete the whole loop. So that's the serial dependence issue. I understand why we're not analyzing that this time around, but I want to make sure that it's kept in mind. And I bring that up because not only is it just an issue with the analysis in the existing conditions report, but it affects the evaluation criteria too. And that is something that we need to talk about tonight. That's because you can't really project demand if you don't take into account the dependencies between the demand at one place affecting the demand at the other. So that's the fundamental concern I have about that analysis. I have pondered some ways you might be able to do some work with the data you already have. And there may be something you can do with separating the origin and destination counts to estimate some paths without having to gather more data. But if that comes up in the future, then I wanted to make sure you were aware. All right, if there are no more comments for the moment about the existing conditions reports, I would very much like to move on to the draft design priorities and evaluation criteria. All right, everyone ready to move on? I see Commissioner Templeton, followed by Vice Chair Chang.
Thank you. And I realized I forgot to mention a response to Commissioner Heckman's, what are we doing here tonight? Because I appreciate that question because we were not all on the same page. Because, but I read the staff recommendation here, and it did ask for feedback for these things, and we are spending a lot of time on it. So I hear your point, but I think has been a good discussion. All right, so for the comments I have on the evaluation criteria, I think the maintenance item does not explicitly call out flooding risk or dealing with flooding risk. And that was a major concern in our XCAP discussions around the underpass. And what we found was that there was a lot of concern about flooding and needing pumps and whatnot to deal with that. So some of the options were excluded for those reasons. I wonder if that would affect our underpass. When I first moved to Palo Alto and I was biking over to work at Google over there in the Mountain View, we had the underpass that was only open under 101, the bike underpass. It's only open half the year because of flooding. So I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work. And I would like to see that flooding risk called out explicitly, either in terms of, feasibility, but also environmental impact, right? We have these underground aquifers in the city, and we've undergrounded a lot of our creeks. Like, there's a lot of reasons to call out our recommended treatment of those underpasses in terms of flooding risk. So that's one area I'd add. The other, for personal security, I really appreciate that you've talked about the crime along our bike paths along the railroad, because this is the number one feedback I get from my teenage daughter when she and her friends want to bike out from Barron Park to Town and Country. I mean, it's dangerous for them. There's often, I would say 50% of the time, they encounter somebody who is unpleasant towards young women on the bike path, and it deters them. And we need to think about that for these underpasses. So I'm glad you have it in there, but I also want to say, I think that is completely distinct from self-harm, right? That is something that this community needs and wants to prioritize. And I think it would be excellent for us to acknowledge that that is one of our goals, right? If we're prioritizing evaluation criteria and design priorities, we have to think about that. And I know it's unpleasant to talk about, but I'm going to try to respectfully discuss. But we have seen some of the incidents be regarding pedestrians that are crossing, have a momentary dangerous thought and act on it, right? So by providing these safer crossings, we're going to reduce that. And that's worth its weight in gold. That's really important for our community. And if we're calling things out, we need to call that out explicitly. So I'm going to urge one more time to add that to the list of criteria. If you can't, if it ends up being too many things and you need to consolidate, please at least include that in the description. And then I'm not sure how to phrase this, and maybe other people will have some suggestions, but the interpersonal, like connecting people to other people. It sounds obvious, and I'm sure that's not why it's not here. But I mean, we discuss the ways of connecting people with their school and with their shopping area and with their place of work and with their, taking Caltrain up to the city, whatever it is. We need to also make sure that we're connecting people with other people. And why this is important is not just, I've given an example about friends at school trying to, connect across neighborhoods, right? We have socioeconomic things that you mentioned from neighborhood to neighborhood. but also think about our seniors, right? Our seniors who are going to be connecting with other people. Yeah, they go shopping too, right? But they also want to be with each other and they want to be more easily connecting with each other. So I just would like to see that as a priority. But I would also like to hear what other people think about that. Those are my 3 suggestions for how to improve our design priority criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Templeton. I have Vice Chair Chang next, and then Commissioner G.
Great. So I love this being on this commission because I wholeheartedly agree with all the things that Commissioner Templeton said, and they are different from the 3 things that I had thought about. So, but you had said maybe somebody can word it differently. I do think that when we talk about overall priorities, we always talk about Palo Alto as being divided by the tracks and divided by ALMA. So, I mean, I think it's an obvious priority that the reason why we're doing this is to connect, like to make us feel like one community, one city. And that, I mean, I'm saying all these things because I'm interested in making sure that this happens instead of going into some, purgatory of like, I don't know, like the last one from 13 or 16 years ago. Okay, so then the other design priorities that I was thinking about, it is partially included already in what's stated in terms of mobility. But I don't think it's explicitly called out enough. So this might be kind of the wording change type thing. And again, this is to hopefully light a fire under the powers that be that are funding. So this is to keep our city moving in the face of what's a growing population. So particularly given the increase in housing. So if we're really going to have 6,000 more units, that is a 20% plus increase in the existing units in our city, which is going to have somewhat proportional population increase. And so, but our roads are not widening, and public transit is such that, I mean, when you hear business people, developers, as well as, well, we just heard it tonight, in fact, that they really think about parking because that makes their housing development marketable. So in other words, people are all coming with cars. And so this is going to keep us moving. And so essentially I know that we talked about future needs, but really the future need is to address a growing population. And I think we should be explicit about that, like a significantly growing one. And then in terms of the evaluation criteria, I know that we talked about the alignment of the facilities themselves, the crossings themselves, to be consistent with the CPTED best practices. But I think, again, like there's crime and then there's traffic safety. And so again, this is like an overall priority, right? Divided city, we know that the kids have to cross these horrible, or every vulnerable population, every non-vulnerable population. So I just think that it's important we don't mention traffic safety explicitly, and that is obviously one of the reasons that we're doing this. And then regarding the mobility criteria or the mobility design priority, what I think is missing from this, and I already spoke about this when I was giving feedback on the existing conditions, is I know that we tried to include the origin destination analysis, but somehow we need to have, and I don't quite know how we're going to measure it, but I really think, I think Commissioner Aiken had emailed staff about this before, which is we got to look at these hotspots across either side of the tracks and see, I mean, as I think about the locations where to site this, site the crossings, really it should connect as many hotspots as possible in a direct line. And I don't think that our origin destination maps are granular enough to kind of give us a sense of that. And so, and I think, obviously staff has highlighted what those hotspots are. And then, so that's kind of what I think should be encapsulated in the criteria, which might not be quite there right now. And then finally, with respect to, you had said, I'm sorry. So finally, you had said feedback on what those, I'm going to call it local destinations might be. A couple that were not explicitly called out on packet page or report page 3, packet page 42. There's the El Camino Real kind of retail area that is highlighted in the bike ped, and that was highlighted in the bike ped plan. So again, if we were to make a map of sort of these destinations, that might be one to add to it, as well as the Midtown shopping area, which I think was alluded to somewhere else, maybe in the existing conditions. And then obviously Gun High School, as we've mentioned many times. But I, as a person who lives in that part of Palo Alto that's in the 1.3 mile, like the largest distance that doesn't have it, like I don't go to some of our local businesses just on the other side of El Camino because it's hard, especially during rush hour. So it's easier for me to get all the way to Mountain View and shop at Trader Joe's and San Antonio than it is to go to Happy Donuts, which is, as the crow flies, like way closer. And so I think that that is one of those, I mean, it has everything to do with everything that I talked about, connecting our community, making us one city, all of that. And so if we are able to show that on a map, it might actually change kind of the face of our retail vibrancy on El Camino and all sorts of other things. So that's it for my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner G.
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, have wholeheartedly agree with my previous commissioners, and I have more additional topics that also I'd like to add. I really like Vice Chair Chang's comments about kind of the connectivity and the deltas between the start and the destination. And I look at the replica data set, and it does look like we are considering start and ends. And so I wonder if there's some metric we can say, which is like, if we were to add this connection, I don't know, at spot B, let's say, then it would reduce the amount of distance that people are traveling by X%, right? I think that there are ways to calculate that using the replica data set as is, because we have the start and end destination points. Or like another way to look at that is like, how close can we get to as the crow flies for these points? And when adding that, I also want to echo Chair Aiken's comments about taking the two crossings together, and that the moment you add one crossing, it will change the model in which you look at the second crossing, right? So for example, the criteria might suddenly say that, I don't know, crossings A and B are the best two crossings, but it probably doesn't make sense to put them next to each other given that they're only 2 or 3 blocks away, right? So I think that that's something interesting to think about when looking at the criteria, is also just having the modeling apply not just for one solo site, but for a connected series of sites. And here's a small nit about the demand row and the improving mobility column. It says here that the description is that projected number of users doing weekday peak hour. I wonder if it just would be helpful to cross out weekday. I don't know if it's particular, like I think just peak congestion in general. I assume that it's probably weekday, but like I just don't know if that's necessary at that point. I'm not super sold on that specific point. And then I also want to heavily emphasize Vice Chair Chang's comments about future population. I think that the word projected in this sub-item really captures it pretty well. But given the previous heat maps that we've seen, we do anticipate significant population growth in some of our areas in kind of the top right quadrant of the maps that we've described. And in addition, I think it's important to think about the schooling impacts in particular, right? Based on the way the map's drawn today, the area on the top right would probably go to Gun. And so it would significantly even more congest what is already now, if anyone tries to go in the morning, a very congested biking corridor. I hate to admit it, but when I was biking there, I'd see like eight bikes trying to go all at the same time. And I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like to add potentially 2,000 more people kind of going through that corridor. And then I have a kind of a clarifying question, which is about the weighting. So in the suppose we have all these design priorities, are they all going to be considered equally weighted, or what is that going to be looking like when we get closer to that phase?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So at this point, we're not considering any weighting of the different CARDES evaluation criteria. It would simply be, the way we're thinking about it is we'll be presenting the results of the evaluation as information. And there won't be a specific number result or anything like that that we come up with.
All right, thank you. Those were all my comments.
Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So I'm looking at packet page 167, the list of draft evaluation criteria. And so one thing I'm observing is there are 14 criteria listed here, plus there may be more added. Are we all literally on the same page? Good, okay. What I'm noticing, I believe that 11 of these criteria are specific to the immediate area of the crossing, wherever the crossing is. So for example, crossing length, right? Area A, that length to make it work might be 140 feet, area B, 210 feet, whatever, right? That's a criteria, but it's all about the location of the crossing. And I think 11 of these are all except for accessibility, demand, and pedestrian and bicycle comfort. Those three criteria look outside of the area of the crossing itself at really how it's going to get used and where its users are going to come from. And so one thing I think you might want to think about is breaking this list of 14 into those two categories. And then within those, and I don't really have any issues on that, all of your criteria about the location of the crossing itself and its attributes. I really want to talk briefly about the three that look outward from the crossing location, because most of the conversation I've heard tonight is almost all of it is about that, other than a few excellent points about a wheelchair has to be able to navigate this, whatever it is, and a person with a shopping cart has to be able to navigate this, whatever it is. But most of what you're hearing is about the people that are going to come from near and far, right? And so that's these three. And I think some of the suggestions that we're hearing maybe would add to those three with some other categories. But in terms of accessibility, I just want to point out that what you've written here, I really like. It's citywide. This is clearly not limited to the study area, even though you've defined a study area, right? The criteria isn't walk and bike access within the study area. It's 15 minutes gets you far outside of the study area in both directions, on the El Camino side and on the Middlefield side. So I really like that. And I think why that's important is I think the theory that we'll want to test through some of this criteria is if we build it, will they come, right? And you want to believe that people will act in the interest of efficiency for themselves and take a shorter distance as long as the safety factors are equivalent, right? And so I think that's a really important metric. And then demand is projected number of users. And I agree with Commissioner G that we should think about the weekday peak hours. And so because I guess one of the things I'm thinking is while weekday peak hours is really important to measure vehicle traffic and its relationship with pedestrians and bicyclists, there's a lot of biking and walking that happens outside of vehicle peak hours. I think like schools get let out 2:30 to 3, which I think is a little earlier than peak traffic hours, but but that mass of 2,000 bicyclists create their own problems even when they're not running into cars. And so I think it's maybe think about whether demand should be looked at a little more broadly. And then the third criteria that is really citywide, not crossing specific, is the pedestrian and bicyclist comfort. And I just want to point out the way you've written, the way this has been written, extent to which existing network would provide low stress alternative access, right? Well, so I think that right now, so I'll preview again. I like crossing B because it's geographically logical. It's the midpoint between the existing California and the coming meadow. But it doesn't exist today. And so we don't have a network of safe biking and walking routes radiating out from it. And so if you keep existing here, what you're going to do is you're going to skew the results in favor of things that are proximate to the existing crossings, because that's where more of the existing safety features radiate out from. So I think on this one, you should think about extent to which it could maybe something like existing or modified bike and pedestrian network would provide low stress access. Because I think what's going to happen in the long run with this is when you identify a new crossing location, wherever it is, and you get to the point where, yeah, I think we're going to go with that, then you're going to start to radiate out and design the connectivity that doesn't exist today to the network that does. So that's my suggestion on that one. And those are my suggestions on the draft criteria. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I have a few minor, fairly concrete. Under improved mobility, I suggest adding a qualitative description, a qualitative criterion, potential to encourage mode shift. As the population increases and as we expect the trips in this area to increase, it might be a useful criterion to select those that will encourage a little more move to active transportation modes. Under enhanced user experience, I have a comment about the crossing design itself. So some crossing designs have ramps that run parallel to the tracks and then make a sharp turn to implement the crossing. So I see that that might be a safety issue for shared use paths. Because a pedestrian coming out of the tunnel and a cyclist coming fast down the ramp won't be able to see each other until close to the turn. It's also, I think, a personal security issue because an assailant waiting in the end of the tunnel will be invisible to somebody, pedestrian or cyclist, coming down the ramp. So I'd suggest having the number of turns as a quantitative evaluation criterion there. And finally, under minimize community impacts, what about traffic congestion impacts? For example, if an approach crosses Alma or maybe Park at grade, then we're going to need to signalize one way or another. So I suspect that's quantifiable in terms that you prefer to use, but I don't know what your preference would be. So my suggestion is to add that under the minimize community impacts category. Let's see, so that's all I have, and I believe I have a light from Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you. And I don't know if everybody had to go yet, but this will be quick. I just wanted to list the accessibility refinements that we've suggested so far, that these underpasses be able to accommodate wheelchairs, shopping carts, strollers, wagons, bike trailers, And what about tandem bikes? Do we have to be able to allow tandem people to bike under? I would say so, because a lot of people like to go to Foothill and bike on Sunday together. So any other thoughts on what other large apparati need to be accommodated? All right, well, that's what we've all mentioned across all of us, and all the suggestions I think were fantastic. Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson?
Just real quick, I didn't want to bring it up earlier, but so let's say if there's a rail trench in the future, do we dig out the underpass and remove it, or the rail trench won't reach this location?
I think our intention is to find out where the train will be, and then we will design these things.
All right, thank you.
All right, if we have no more questions or comments about the evaluation criteria, shall we move on to advice about locations? Commissioner Heckman.
All right, I'll go first since I've already previewed mine. So this has been a great discussion, but it's really interesting because I guess my approach in getting ready for this meeting tonight, I took kind of the opposite approach. I think I didn't start with the criteria and then try to see where that led me. Instead, I would say the approach I took was, all things being equal, if all things were equal, what are the geographically most logical locations? And then once I identified those, then I asked the question, well, are all things really equal? Or are there some of these evaluation criteria that make the geographic location not necessarily the best location? And so, as I've mentioned earlier, the two I came up with, the two crossings that make the most sense to me as being geographically logical are first crossing B, which is along some in the vicinity of Matadero Creek, and it's roughly halfway between Cal Ave and Meadow Drive, which is a future crossing, but by the time B is realized, hopefully it will be there. It doesn't, I am noticing in looking at this diagram, there's another circle at Colorado Avenue, which wasn't really referenced. So I'm not clear about that one, whether that's, if that is an existing crossing, then B is a little closer to that than it is to Meadow. But otherwise it's, and B is pretty wide, so it can be anywhere in there. But anyway, so that was one of the ones I liked. And again, because it's covering an area of 1.3 miles with no crossings, no pedestrian, like underground type crossings, it has the potential to feed a wide swath that exists in the middle of the city, in the middle of this part of the city, on the south side, south of California and north of Meadow, on both sides of Middlefield, on both sides of El Camino. It has that, if you can imagine, kind of a middle corridor there. It has that prospect. And then the other one I liked, as I mentioned earlier, was E. And I like E more than F because, again, I'm looking to serve the most southerly part of our city, but E is where E would come out in both sides in Palo Alto, whereas F, you're coming from the east, you're in Palo Alto, but once you cross the tracks, you're in, I think that, I don't know if right there it's, well, I guess in that corner, it's Los Altos. And then Los Altos back up into, so I don't know that Los Altos is willing to share the cost with us any more than they were when we did Foothill Park in the 60s. And so I think we should be looking at E, but also, I mean, I'm a little facetious there, but really I like E's a little more central, although it's closer to Charleston. But I will say that and this really gets to that criteria about the network that gets us there, that I'm liking E to, what I'm imagining is there will be a number of high schoolers in this San Antonio 101 dense development, and they're going to need to get to Gunn. And I think that the way they would do it without riding down San Antonio, which I don't think we're going to want them to ride the length of San Antonio, is from the development to Charleston, then to Montrose, and then through Cubberly, and then through the Green Meadow neighborhood. I think that's what you come out of E, I think it's Green Meadow. I think that's the road. But that's a challenge because that route doesn't exist today. So that's a potential shortcoming of E, and that's where some of the criteria you've identified about the connectivity, it might suggest E is not great, F works better. So, but if we can make that connection work, it seems like it's safer, and it takes the kids in a direction that's closer to Gunn rather than, traveling a little bit more southerly down San Antonio. Now they're too far south and they have to come back north to get to Gunn. So those are my thoughts.
Seeing no other lights, I'll make, oh, I apologize. I did catch you. Please proceed first.
Sorry, I mean, you're welcome to go first if you wish, but I did do my light. I will say that this might be one of the only situations where I have slightly more biking insight than you. There is a path through Los Altos neighborhood area there that the kids take to get to the candy shop. And so they could double back. I'm just saying, like, that's the only way I can get my kids to bike. I tell them on the weekends, go to the candy shop, and they bike with their friends, and they have a lot of good time. They don't cross, though, of course, here for a variety of reasons that you mentioned. Did you want two? Is that what you were asking us? Did you want two recommendations?
There's no set number at this point. The overall goal for this project is to select two design concepts at two separate locations. So,
okay, so
but you're
yes.
welcome to provide.
Okay.
Well,
I'm just trying to figure out. Yeah. All right. So A seems impractical. F seems impractical. Thank you for providing us easy ones to eliminate. D seems impractical because we have long-standing plans to provide crossings at those locations adjacent. I don't know, is the intention of D to just tell the railroad people, never mind, we got this, you don't have to do bike and peds? Okay, go ahead.
No, in fact, if you imagine, I mean, I think this location came up because if those two locations adjacent are both shut down at the same time, D serves both of them well.
Okay, but they won't be shut down for a long time, will they? I mean, you couldn't possibly be planning that.
We don't, grade SEP is not my project, and I am thankful for that, but
let me relieve you of answering this question. It would be really important, I think, for the Department of Transportation's grade separation person to include the precaution not to shut down both of those major corridors for the South at the same time. I understand why Caltrain would like that to happen because that would annoy them less, but honestly, kids need to be able to get to school. So just putting that on the record. I'm not saying you said anything about it. you were off the hook. So A, for me, A is not worth considering, F is not worth considering, and D is hopefully not worth considering because the grade set project would not make that necessary. Also, it would be a waste if we did this permanent infrastructure improvement and had 3 within this little area undercrossings in this part of town and left the rest of it unserved. So for me, then that leaves us B, C, and E. B is one that we have heard for many years as a strong need for crossing at Loma Verde area, to be determined what exact street. So I highly encourage us to prioritize that one. If we do have the planned railroad crossing grade separation down near D and E, we don't need C either. So if I were going to do a second project, I would do it up closer to Churchill. Like I know that is a planned grade separation. However, that one is not, a lot of people haven't seen that design yet, and I suspect that there'll be an interest in having some other way of crossing Alma and the railroad tracks. So if I had a second project, I would do something up there closer to that area. But B would be the priority down here, with the caveat that the ones on Meadow and Charleston would exist. So thanks.
Commissioner James.
Well, lots of people like B, including me. I think I read there was a feasibility study like right there that made it look like, I'll go further and say that Loma Verde, from the feasibility study that I read or thought I understood, was really the only viable route in there because of various factors. So that looks good to me. And the BPTP map network figure 2 on page 141 looks like it envisions a bicycle boulevard across from where Loma Verde meets Alma and what looks like, I think, Matadero. I mean, I couldn't tell from the resolution of my map. And another envisioned bike boulevard at Park Boulevard, which would intersect with that crossing as well, which eventually goes to Gunn, and it appears to provide an alternative to Meadow and Charleston, which I think we hear overwhelmingly is needed. And I think it also crosses into the Cornelis Bowl bike path, if I'm reading the maps correctly and kind of aligning them in my head. So I just feel like that looks like I walked the route. I started from, I thought it made perfect sense from a bird's eye view, and then I walked the route. And to me, it seemed clear that that was, from my perspective, the best option. So much so that I didn't even select a second, though I was very mindful of what Commissioner Heckman said about that, where we're expecting new development. I didn't come up with a solution on my own, though it actually looks like maybe Loma Verde could also serve that population, projected future population. I mean, I kind of I love all these criteria make perfect sense to me. I try and make things as simple as I possibly can, and it just seems like there are really clear benefits for improving convenience and safety to that adjacent population and to a future population on the other side of the tracks.
Thank you. Vice Chair Chang.
Actually, I don't think I have much to add, given what everybody said. So we'll leave it at that.
All right. This time, seeing no other lights. Oh, not so fast. Commissioner G.
Apologies, Chair. I will echo B, no further comments there. I think that going off of Commissioner Templeton's comment about Churchill, I believe that there is a planned crossing at Seal. Staff, is that correct? So I believe that there is something planned there. I would like to also endorse spot E as proposed by Commissioner Heckman. I think specifically, I would love, so I live pretty close there, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to connect the new developments, as Commissioner Heckman said, but also there's pretty good access if we were to envision what a future would look like, connecting some of those points in the Green Meadow neighborhood via this road to Wilkie, which is the Peninsula bike path. I think there's some opportunity there as well, which is, you can see the line that's like Wilkie and Miller on below. And I think that if I were to prioritize these, I would prioritize B and then E, but I do think that having two in the south side is important.
Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about E, given that those two green dots are already planned.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's, I don't know, I guess like the way I think about it is that there's probably a lot of just people, as someone who's just biked a lot, like I think having like, if we continue to expand in the kind of direction on the San Antonio side, I expect that even today, if I were to bike, I very much used to avoid as much as I could biking during school hours around Meadow. And so just having another spot there potentially to relieve congestion, I think given the amount of development that we have in the new areas is important. But again, I would significantly prioritize B above E for that particular reason.
Commissioner Heckman.
Yeah, if I can answer that too, since I like E. One of the things I looked at was that Meadow and Charleston, which is where those Caltrans projects are coming, those are busier streets. And E is not inviting kids to be on those streets, but rather to ride on some of our smaller, more neighborhoody streets. And I liked that aspect of it. Although, as I mentioned before, we don't know the exact route that would take, but the idea is to not put them on the streets that are carrying the most cars.
Commissioner Peterson.
I just want to comment, I'm being pretty solidly swayed towards location E. That just hearing the comments, it's coming through.
All right. I have a couple of observations. I spent a lot of time looking at the field study notes and also at the short trip counts. So Oregon really dominates the crossings for all the short trips total, but San Antonio is a really close second. So San Antonio dominates for all the trips in the range of 1 to 4 miles. So I think that argues to me that we should be throwing a lot of weight in those two directions. Now, of the potential crossings close to Oregon, judging from the field study notes, El Dorado really looks like the easiest to implement. It's close enough to Oregon to capture a lot of the traffic there, and it seems to have a reasonable connection into Midtown. So of the category B sites, El Dorado looks the most appealing to me. Loma Verde has a good location in this crossings desert, but the implementation looks challenging. And I'm not sure that El Verano has much of a payoff because it's so close to Meadow. On the other end, I'm going to break with the trend here. Both Lindero and Ely look difficult, and I don't think they add enough value over Meadow and Charleston once the grade separations are done. So I'm going to argue for F for the San Antonio crossing. Sure, that's not going to serve Palo Alto exclusively, but this is an area where there is going to be a lot of growth, and there is already bike infrastructure in Mountain View on San Antonio So I think we're close to making a reasonable connection there and potentially serving people who would be moving to Palo Alto further north on San Antonio. So those are the two that I think weighed most heavily for me. So around El Dorado and the San Antonio overpass. Commissioner Templeton.
I just wanted to weigh in some agreement there. I think F is superior to C, D, and E because it would, my understanding is that the crossings at Meadow and Charleston are going to spend significant amounts of time, effort, and funding to create the world's most beautiful bike and pedestrian crossings. I know you have all been viewing those with intense interest as I have. Unless that could be exchanged for a crossing at D, I'm not sure it would be worth it, but F has potential and that would be one that we would not want to exclusively fund as Palo Alto. That would happen with a cooperation with the other jurisdictions, perhaps with state or federal funding. But I like F better than C, D, or E. Thanks.
Let's see, I'm sorry I didn't get the order correctly on these. So Commissioner Heckman, then Commissioner G.
Question, is there a pedestrian bike undercrossing currently at San Antonio Caltrain?
Yes, there is. So it's a grade separated under Caltrain at Mayfield Avenue in Mountain View.
Okay, so maybe staff could, F is somewhat proximate to that. So maybe staff can give us a little flavor of, what attracted them to that location, given that it's close to an existing location. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant. I mean, staff identified F as a possibility, and I'm asking, given that the San Antonio undercrossing's right there, which you knew about, you still liked it enough to put it on the table, and I'd like to know why.
Yeah, thank you. So F is located in an area that is representative of San Antonio Road and the interchange that is mostly in Palo Alto, but as we've all heard, it's partially in Mountain View. There's also the San Antonio Avenue, which runs parallel to San Antonio Road and then connects to Alma. That is in Palo Alto. The reason for including location F is just recognizing the potential to do something either at the interchange or at San Antonio Avenue, which has already been pointed out to provide that connection into Mountain View along San Antonio Road, given that there's already bicycle facilities on the Mountain View section and on San Antonio Road. And also recognizing that some of the work that's being done in the part of the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan, even though it is draft, does propose bike facilities along San Antonio Road in Palo Alto, as well as a connection along Alma from San Antonio Avenue to Charleston. So recognizing the connection between the two plans, that's sort of the thought process for including this as a potential location.
I'm still leaning toward E, but I like F more now than I did before I came tonight. Again, you're just looking for feedback tonight, not votes, and so I wanted to include that.
Commissioner G.
Thank you. I also took a good look at the field visit. The field visit looked like you guys had a lot of fun. There's a lot of photos of the people on the bikes. I think that for me, I think generally I want to echo Commissioner Heckman's comment about as a biker, and especially as someone who biked to school as a child, I think prioritizing low car traffic streets is really important to me. And that's why E sticks out specifically. And I guess so does B in that context. I wonder if F would encourage a lot of people to be using San Antonio Road, which I've previously stated in the BPTP update that I'm generally opposed to having lots of bikes on major roads, which I know is part of the current design. But I just want to echo my sentiment for E. Although I do wonder what kinds of support we could provide for the existing undercrossings, given that in fact there are actually 2 crossings at San Antonio. What additional work should be done there? But it's just a pondering thought, but I'm still supportive of E.
Commissioner Templeton, then Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to suggest that perhaps the E and F locations need to be rethought and perhaps converged for a future discussion. That is an option that you may consider. Thanks.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Can we open Google Maps for location app? It's actually, somebody walked the train station with the map. So it's you can actually walk the path.
While this is being pulled up, I know at the very beginning you actually talked about potentially other options, and maybe echoing Commissioner Templeton's spot, maybe there is some compromise somewhere between E and F that is an option as well.
San Antonio Caltrain station. There we go. Just click on the pin. It should give you an option for street view.
You can also click on layers, so it'll give you that option as well.
Oh, that's right, you're from Google. Did you make this? There we go. So we actually want to be on the other side of the street. Right. I wonder if it'll walk into the underpass. Oh, there we go.
Where's the underpass?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're watching at home, don't cross the expressway this way.
Yeah, I guess, wait, go back, Veronica.
There you go. Now you can walk, it's, if you, the underpass is right there in front of you. There we go. Oh, it'll take us all the way through. Yep. This is how we get to the movie theaters with my kids. There you go. Looks a lot like the underpass that's just out here.
Oh, so that's part of the train station.
Uh-huh.
It's not a separate facility.
Nope. Yeah. And then if you go back the other way you came, it'll take you across Alma. There's the shopping cart. Now, I'll be the first to say this probably could use some money to be redone. Let's see, go back up the ramp to the left, or there you go. You want to go back the other way. There you go. Yep. Yeah, go down the stairs. Sorry.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're awesome. Okay, there you go. And then, yep. Yeah, looks just like me walking my kids around there. Me and my kids like literally ran up this as fast as we could trying to get to the chain and missed it. And then if you go all the way to the end of the station, this is how you cross Alma as a pedestrian. You just keep going. It looks like a dead end, but there's a pathway there. There you go. And
Some personal safety could be improved here.
Yeah, it's a little sketchy. I think there's holes cut in the fence in spots here. Maybe they fixed it. And then down here, it's got the bike lockers. There you go. And there's a stairs somewhere you can walk up to go to the overpass. I don't know where this, I think the stairs are like right there in front of you somewhere. There we are. There's the stairs. Yep. Anyways, so that's the existing F that sounds like is being reimagined, which I can see why. This is rocket science, you know, pedestrian for the 90s when this was built, I guess. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Commissioner G? Ghost light, apologies. All right, I see no other lights. Do we have any final comments before we close this item? Very good. Thank you all. This was more complicated than I expected, but informative, and I hope it was useful. It certainly brought all of us up to speed on a lot of these issues. So thank you. All right, it looks like the next item is approval of minutes. May I have a motion?
Move approval as revised of the April 9th verbatim and summary minutes.
Second. Let's see. Was everyone present? I don't think so. Was there? We were all present? Okay. So we can do this by voice vote then. Ms. Dow?
Yes, you can do a voice vote.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, passes unanimously. Commissioner questions, comments, and announcements. Commissioner Heckman?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that it's 9:46 and under our agenda, we were going to finish item 4 at 9:40. And I think that's a credit to our fairly new chair. I just want to acknowledge when we actually hit the mark as we did tonight. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I will take that, although I suspect luck had a lot to do with it. Commissioner Templeton.
Yes, Commissioner Heckman mentioned upcoming absences, and staff also mentioned dearth of things to do in June, and I wondered if we should discuss that as a group. So does anyone else anticipate being out in June?
I too am going to miss the June 11th meeting.
My son will be in need of his mother for medical reasons that day. He has a surgery the day before, so I may also miss it. That's 3. Anyone else?
I mean, if there's general consensus, I think it's fine, given that we
Heckman,
don't
aren't you
have.
out on the 11th?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Templeton was including me as a third, right? Yeah.
And so since we don't at the moment have any urgent items for that date, from a staff perspective, I would be comfortable stating it as canceled and listing that as part of the report that we put together for your meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments tonight?
Can we still come for dinner on June 11th?
You can meet me at the hospital.
Or dessert?
All right, then we are adjourned.